All stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We will start the meeting off with recognitions.
Wrestling please.
Bring in your wrestling group, Mitch.
Make one up against the wall if you want. Welcome our state participants in wrestling, Coach Sokol and Coach Schmitz.
Good try.
Come on in. Thanks, guys.
Yep,
come over here. Welcome to our state participants, 2018. We've got both of our coaches here, Coach Sokol and Coach Schmitz. So would you like to give a little highlights of the season and kind of share a little something?
Sure. This year we were 13-7 overall. We ended up taking 7 guys to the sectional tournament. We ended up 4 at the state tournament, and we had one that placed 5th, Riley Workman. Kind of not the season we wanted, but looking back, it's still successful. Our dual meet might not look like we were that successful, but when you're giving up anywhere from 3 to 4 weight classes and you're starting down 18 points to 24 points, it's kind of tough to come back from, and we did that multiple times this year. We ended up 4th in the conference. The conference champs ended up 2nd in state, and the second team in the conference was a sectional finalist. So, you know, we're in pretty good competition. Like I've told people in the last couple of years, you know, everybody thinks that our program's starting to dwindle down, and they got to remember that we were always at the top, and now people have learned from us, and they've elevated their programs to ours. So we got to figure out how to push the bar a little bit higher. So that's what we're going to be working on this summer for next year. We got going to have 3 great leaders here that's been to the state tournament a couple times each, so they know how to get there, and now we just got to figure out how to win it. So, but you know, successful year for us, and a bright future.
Congratulations on a great season.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're going to come over here and say hello to me first. We'll shake hands. The board would like to recognize you and shake your hand, and then we got a small gift for you on the way out. So congratulations on a great game. Thank you. Congrats. Well, thank you. Congratulations. Thank you for your I don't believe our coaches from Dodgeville are here for Dodge Point Gymnastics, but I just want to double check. I just wanted to recognize that it is a co-op program, and this year they finished 8th as a team, and we continue to enjoy that relationship that we have with Dodgeville, with our gymnastics team. Individually, there was a Dodgeville athlete that placed 5th on the floor, so their program continues to do well and recognized at the state level, and again, we hope to build some participants back into the program and help them be a successful team. So thank you and congratulations, Dodgeville. And mock trial. Coach Cool with some hardware.
I love it.
And the team.
I love gavels. I have a bunch of them in my room. My former students know I got gavels that students had made me, and now I got one that I got on a plaque.
So Mr. Cole, congratulations on a state championship run, and tell us a little bit more about your team, your season, and a little bit about mock trial.
Well, mock trial is battle of wits against another school, where we get a set of case materials in, middle of November, and then we spend the month of December and January, a lot of time in early February, trying to hammer out witness roles and attorneys developing their question lines and opening and closing statements. And then we do 4 trials in one day, a very exhausting one day. And this year, we've done it for 19 years, and this year we finally had a team that advanced to what they call the state semifinals, which was this past weekend, and you do the trial 4 more times to determine 2 finalists, and Shorewood was this year's state champion. They did their
Who is DC Everest?
Shorewood beat them. The 4-0 team lost. DC Everest was 4-0 going into the state final. Shorewood was 3-1, and then they ended up winning in the state final. So it was kind of an upset in the state final. But a lot of effort from the kids, and I got to thank everybody, because we had 2 teams, and both teams did very, very well. And it was really close cut which one of our teams would advance to the state level. This team did advance. The team that advanced included Maddie Ball, Brady Paulskill, Hans Miller, McKenna Reichling. Those are the ones that are here with me today. And then Matthew Berg, Nick Du Bois, and Milo Wong competed with us on the day we advanced. But he was at a wedding this weekend, so he couldn't go with us we were just 6 that competed at the state level. But our other team, which was very integral in helping us get to that point. We shared questions, we worked with each other extensively, but that also included Hawkins Schriefer, Zoe Hay, Cole Wilson, Caden Jackson, Jacob Mollers, Karsten Bakken, Zula Flannery, and Cody Pierce. And this year we had the help of Lisa Hay, who helped us tremendously, not only getting ready for the regional, but her advice on how to present at the state level helped us. And I think the tips that I shared with the team members, they felt so much more comfortable at the state level, and to see exactly what she had put in our notes is exactly what we needed to do, and our kids did a nice job transferring that this weekend. So this was our regional runner-up, and I'm proud of our kids, and they're doing a great job, and we hope to go back next year.
Yeah.
All right, we will we'll do roll call. It appears everybody is present. Do I have anything to document that? Approval of minutes?
Let's do roll call quick.
We did.
Oh, we did, sorry.
I'll let you.
Okay.
Approval of minutes? Motion by Lisa. Second by Larry.
Second by Larry.
Any discussion?
Yeah.
Corrections?
I have a correction, I think it's in the regular meeting, the February 12th one. There's a reference to policy, if we could go to it.
Page 8, number 3, under items for action.
Oh, I already see it, 4.5, it should be.
Policy 345.68, is that the one you're
I'm
talking
actually
about?
not in it, I can't get it up right now. I think it's 223, it's the one that is on our agenda tonight, and the minutes from last month makes it seem like we approved it.
Oh.
So again, page 8. I
Yeah,
believe.
it says to accept. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, to expect.
So,
I just don't know
you
what
see
that
this
means.
up here?
Oh,
Yeah. You got the same place?
okay.
I think it was wasn't it to merge those 2 policies together and bring it back this month?
Can't say for certain.
It seems weird that there would have been a motion and then an approval of a policy that we knew we had to revise, and it is on tonight's agenda.
Okay.
So I didn't know what to make of that.
You want to get paid?
How about motion to table? What if that just said table?
And because I do recall Member Bush had some reservations, I thought, on that one, so I did thought, or think it was gonna go to committee, and now we're back again, so we have time to flush out the issues in the policy, but
Yeah.
motion to table, would that be appropriate?
Yeah, that would be
Okay,
good.
so we're just gonna change it to motion
Yeah.
to table.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, you include that in your motion, John? Sure. Make a correction, Larry, your second's okay with that? Any other corrections or discussion on the minutes? All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Communications, board communications received?
I received some communications from some special ed parents suggesting to me that, and with a lot of questions, that I think we should consider creating a special ed parent-teacher association, or at least explore that.
Well, the parents do that, don't they? The parents themselves
Yes.
do that.
But just to get the ball rolling, what if we set a date and see what kind of interest there is? And yes, it would be nice for the parents to take control of it and to have, you know, have an organization that meets on a regular basis and communicates, you know, with the administration and have parents and teachers involved in it, to help people with questions that they have and issues that they want resolved. I feel like there needs to be an outlet, and we maybe could help facilitate that happening. So could we maybe set a meeting, a date for some exploratory meeting to have some sort of special ed parent-teacher association?
I think that's a parent's initiative.
I think too, if we're gonna get into a discussion, we might wanna just put it on a future agenda.
All right, I'm good with that. I'm good with that.
But I think
Certainly at
you're,
any time, if there's a group of parents that want to organize.
And maybe when we get to the citizen comments, that we'll hear some comments and questions that are coming from those parents.
Any other board member communications? All right, citizen communications? Amanda Tupper.
Good evening. I really did not plan to speak, but, again, my name is Amanda Tupper, former teacher here, but primarily I'm here as a parent. I received this in my Friday Kids folder about the possible consideration of a reduction in force for next year's kindergarten class, and I'll be honest, I got a kid in it for next year. And I guess what my concern is, I have taught now, or been in the classroom, high school, middle school, and elementary. Those elementary kids, especially the younger, are needy compared to middle school and high school. And just when I was in those classrooms, I'm exhausted. And I'm just there filling in for a day. God bless those who are there every day, because there's no way I could ever do that. And with that, I know there's a lot of research that says small classroom sizes and all that. And it is true, as a teacher myself, smaller classroom sizes, I got to spend more one-on-one time with kids. I got to do more stuff, more hands-on, things like that, to engage the students and to be more involved with them. And also, I got to know the students better. And with all the stuff that's happening in our schools this day, having that contact with the kids and knowing them is so crucial. And Kaden, you're in wrestling, congratulations, you did awesome last night. You know, giving that little recognition that you can do is so. When you have a limited amount of time, 40 minutes, 45 minutes, and you have 20 minutes or 20 kids in a classroom, you're talking about a maximum of 2 minutes per kid that you are spending quality time with. And that's with like no teacher talking, going over lessons or learning, okay? And so with that, I also want to mention how crucial it is. I know most of you have kids, some of you have grandkids, and at the young age, you know how hard it is that they are developing a new language. They are getting to know what it's like to be a preschooler. They're getting to know what it's like to be a first grader, second grader, kindergarten, everything. Everything is new to them. And so if we don't focus on them a little bit more, that is our foundation, okay? They are learning how to spell cat. We take advantage of that, okay? But if you're sitting down with your child and you're trying to teach them, this is what sounds are like, this is how you count to 100, this is how you show empathy towards kids, towards adults, okay? That's where we do need that extra time. That's where that class time is very significant, is especially that pre-K to 3rd grade, is where their brains are so developing at a rapid rate. And as a teacher and as a parent, it is so hard to keep up. And so with all the stuff that you guys have going on right now, I'm just asking for you to take a look and take a step back and remember when your child was that young, when your grandchild was that young, or when you were that young, okay? And remember how hard it is to learn. And kids that age, if they have a question and the teacher is helping somebody else, they're not like a high school brain. They're like, well, let me move on to the next question, and then I'll just wait to ask the teacher later. Little kids don't think of that. They're then sitting there and they're waiting. They're waiting for the teacher to come and help them. And if the teacher doesn't come for 10, 15 minutes because they're helping the other kids, there is wasted learning time. So I urge you to take a double check and look before any approval is made for a reduction. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. Anybody else? All right. Items for information and discussion. Elementary School Planning Committee.
I'd like to introduce or reintroduce Maggie and Leah, if you're willing to come up and join us for a moment, just to report out on our most recent elementary school planning committee. Is there an additional chair there?
Yeah. Maybe this one? We got one.
Hello again.
Good evening.
Yeah, so just to give you an update from our last ESPC meeting, we updated the committee on the board meeting and operation committee meetings that took place in February. We also had FEH in attendance again, and we reviewed the goals for the committee, the scope of the work, or the types of work they would like, we would like them to look at through the workshop process. And they also took time to review the timeline of the public input workshop that we had talked about last time, and the timeline beyond that, workshop. Anything else?
No, I think the most important thing was just the goals, and they're posted here for everyone to take a look at. I think they're also in the board packet. Just
Page
kind of
11.
identifying the key broader scope goals in terms of what the needs might be, and how those tie back into the strategic plan for the district, as well as just meeting all of the things that were important to the group collectively.
Yep.
Thanks. Segueing into the operations committee, also had an opportunity to meet on the proposal that was made last board meeting. Do you want to follow up with that meeting?
We just had a discussion on the scope of work, and I just wanted more information, and I talked about why I needed that information, and I thought that was important because 13,000 may not sound like a lot initially, but I wanted more input, and I think they answered my questions. And I personally came to the conclusion that without having the input from the public from that, the meeting, that as a board member, when it comes time to make a decision on their proposals, I couldn't make a good decision. So I think, for me, that's why that was important. Larry, if you want to speak to that, why, how we,
Well, through the discussion,
yeah,
a concern of mine was the, a two-day event in, for this during an operation, and at the last board meeting too, whether that much time is needed with the participation, if you're gonna, you talked about having it during a parent-teacher conference. I understand it's probably a good night, good afternoon to have it. I just didn't feel at that time that the second day was needed. However, there has been some negotiation on the cost of the two-day event, from what I understand. And we'll get to that later in the agenda. And that was a concern of mine.
so I think we're ready to take a vote.
If you'd like to make a motion?
Motion to vote on the FEH. How do I word that?
It'd be to approve a design workshop.
To approve a design workshop with FEH for the space planning committee.
So we'll move then, it's on the agenda later.
It's on it later, okay.
And if it's okay with the board, we can certainly act on it.
Or
Under-
also, was it under action items?
It was under business
Business,
service.
okay. Well, something else came out of that meeting, if we want to wait on that vote, or if you want to vote, but something else came out of that meeting that doesn't have anything to do with the space planning committee that I'd like to address, so I would like to get the FEH thing either for later or now, it doesn't matter, but I'd like to address what else came up during that meeting.
If we're on topic, let's address that vote. I would say
Okay.
right now, if it's okay with the board. So the new amount, Luke,
$11,950. That does remove one architect on one of the days that was originally scheduled in the original plan, so this is a different proposal that's in front of the board from the last proposal.
and the only difference is one less architect, and how many architects does that give us then?
I believe that's 3 on the first day and 4 on the second, with a civil engineer one day being solicited for purposes of looking at parking and infrastructure.
Okay.
There was
Still a two-day event.
still a
though,
2-day event.
just Based on your concern.
Working with Kevin and Christie, they thought it was important to have that second day of planning to further refine some of the initial studies that were done on day 1, and also to focus primarily on the civil engineering part on day 2, so we can look specifically at parking and parking patterns and so forth.
And budget.
And budget. Thank you, Christie.
And the civil engineer also recommended specifically for the location where the elementary school is, being on such a slope location. It's not, I believe not something that's always,
Correct.
yeah, it's always included in the workshop format, but they felt that it was important because of our fun topography in Center Point.
Anything, Christie, you want to add?
No, are there any questions about our process? We've gone through it a couple times, so if there are any questions, we'd be happy to answer them. But I think it is explanatory with what's up on the screen and what the ladies have presented, so.
The committee feels confident in the communication plan that we'll be able to get the word out and get people to attend.
Yeah, we had a discussion about, we wanted to obviously wait for board approval before communicating with anyone, obviously. But we definitely did some pre-planning in case the board did approve it at this meeting, so that we'd be ready to go with the help of Joelle and everybody's upon approval.
Thank you.
I think that's really important, that this time, that people actually participate. If we're going to spend this kind of money on this, that people come and talk to those people and give their input. It's really important, because without that, there's information out there that gets talked about that's not true. So the more informed the community is, the better, and it's best to inform yourself.
Just
just a question related to that in the messaging. So we're removing the word charrette from the external, okay? I just
Yeah. Yeah, we wanted to make it as clear to what it was. We didn't want people to be guessing about that word.
I thought that's, we had just determined that, but I just want to make sure.
Yeah.
All right, we are under business services now. Does somebody want to make a motion to approve?
I did.
You did.
You did?
I'll second it.
Second by Julie. Any further discussion? We'll do a roll call. Angie?
Gumma. Aye. Hay.
Yes.
Stevenson.
Yes.
Basting.
Yes.
Bush.
Yes.
Dolphin.
Oh.
Stefas.
Yes. Thank you, please.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Excited for the,
Thank you.
All right.
So the meetings, just when?
so the workshops are taking place next Tuesday and Wednesday at the elementary school from 8:30 to 7:30 pretty much. And
8:30 in the morning.
8:30 in the morning to 7:30 at night. There will be presentations at around lunchtime, around noon.
At noon and at 6. And school board members are strongly recommended and requested to attend, as well as everybody here.
And is there anything you'd like to say to the public as far as like why they should come?
I guess that, yeah, there are, I would say that, to Julie's point, that, or to Kelly's point, that having this workshop is a really great buy-in process for the community, understanding the decision the board will make in the future. But in addition to that, I believe that the product that FEH, the design firm, is able to come up with will be greatly enriched by having so much input from the community, and the more voices the better. They seem really adept at taking a lot of different information and collating it and providing what we hope is a really great product.
The other thing that'll be available that evening is to take a tour of the school. So if you haven't seen all of the spaces, there's a lot of corners and spaces that are being utilized in creative ways now to meet the needs of the students. So those will be available for everybody to kind of take a look at. So,
I don't know if you'll be able to tour the school when we're having conferences though. That'll be a little bit.
Right, yeah, very clear.
So,
I mean, in the rooms, I guess.
are you doing radio?
Are we doing radio?
We have the Mineral Point Minute on WDMP, so we get a free minute every week, so it will go in the thing I submit tomorrow.
Okay, so only once?
No, it runs on Thursdays and Fridays, I believe. We have a paid ad for the newspaper ready to go. We have direct mailings to postcards ready to print tomorrow.
Do they have like a free event thing every day, or like the paper does, you can do free events on there or no?
Every day.
Or I don't know, but I don't know how to get it out there more on the radio.
If you pay for advertising, you can't get free advertising.
Okay.
We've got a plan. I think with the direct mailing and everything, I think it'll be.
And the idea is for the public to come and give their opinions and their ideas?
Yeah, anything. I mean, Christy, you can speak more to this, I guess. You can speak to
Oh, yes, I'm Christy with FEH. I'll be at the charrettes, and we essentially want everybody from the public to come and give their comments and be part of the process, because we're going to take the public comments and bring them back to the planning committee, and then the planning committee is going to review the comments and bring them back to the board. So we take the public comments, we're going to design. If you have an idea for a different design configuration, or how you think the school should be revised, or what you think should happen, we would love to hear your comments, and we're there to sketch your ideas. We come with no preconceived notion, so we'd love to hear what you guys want, so we can show it, make it happen, give you a budget for it.
And if I can add, I think something else that's kind of exciting is that we can bring the students through as they're working. So they'll get a first-hand experience in it all too.
Yeah, we like student comments. They have creative ideas on what the school should be as well.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you guys.
Looking forward to it. Yeah.
Thank you.
So the second part of that meeting, the meeting that we had for operations, a community member came and community member came and addressed the issue of safety and felt like we weren't taking enough action or serious action. And in light of recently what's happened, I know the last report that I gave on the safety was just a timeline of when things are going to be done. But I had 2 phone calls from parents about why isn't safety number 1 on the board's mind? And I guess we need to talk about that more, because number 1 thing is safety. In the grade school especially, we have an issue with the entrance of the high school that's not been addressed. Every time safety has been brought up, it's kind of just, I just kind of talk and no one says anything, and then we decide on a timeline. But I have submitted some things that I thought would be beneficial for safety. One was, I sent to administrators, it's a door lock that locks from the inside, but it was developed by a student in Wisconsin, a tech ed student. It costs $50. Schools usually buy one to see if they like it, but I don't think we can no longer say that we don't have any money for safety. I don't know, I know that the government may give us some money for stuff that they want to give us money for safety, but there are definite things that need to be done. And I don't know if we can wait for, you know, a new building or some revision, but the longer we wait, the timeline's there and the scope is there. And I understand that I think suicide used to be the highest rate for students now, but I think it's swapped. I think that ratio is swapped now, that
With what?
children dying in schools by gunshots.
It's higher than suicide?
I think it's swapped, the latest. The last I read, I'll try to find it again, but,
Can I just, I mean, I don't know that safety isn't a concern of any of ours. I don't know that we've ever said that it wasn't a concern. I think that there probably are, obviously, every time something like this comes up, it's another, like, fear that, rightfully so, right? But I think reacting to it, we just have to be careful of what we're doing as well in terms of reacting to something that may or may not. I mean, clearly there's inconsistency even right now in what we believe the data is that we're talking about. So I think keeping it on the operations committee agenda and this agenda is hopefully a way that we can keep it top of mind, so no one from the community or anyone else thinks that it's not a concern of ours, because it is. I just want to make sure we clarify that, because I don't believe that that's ever been said at our board level, that safety of the students is not a concern of ours.
I think our willingness not, I don't think, we don't have to be reactionary, but we can be proactive. And I don't think we're proactive enough. And I think that within 2 weeks, you know, when you hear on the news, not only was Parkland, then the next week there was another killing, and that wasn't even brought to light as much. So it's not like it's not happening consistently. It's not 6 months apart. Those shootings were a week apart. So I'm not trying to rile up a fear base, but it's clear that it's happening more often.
And through that operations committee meeting, I mean, there have been some ideas presented and just discussed, and some of these ideas really have no cost to the district at all. I mean, for example, moving our security officer out by the front door. I mean, all this is really a move that can happen after school one day. And I think just inexpensive moves like that would certainly help safety and make it look like the board is taking safety seriously. And you're right, they've never said they are. But we gotta make attempts to do that.
No, but when some things are mentioned, we don't have money for that. Well, you know, sometimes we have money for things and sometimes we don't. When I talked about the camera, on the scope of camera, you know, for the school to be out farther, we don't have money for that. We cannot we cannot just say we don't have money. We have to have a plan for safety. And there are parents wanting that, not only social emotional plan, how we're gonna make kids aware of that or healthier about that, but taking care of things, and especially, to your point, swapping those offices. If Bill is the first person you see coming into the door, into the building here, at least has, at least Bill's there and he's trained, and at least that's a small move.
I also like Kelly's idea. I think we should instruct the administration to purchase one of these door locks. Let's get one in the district and see what they're like, and see if they're as easy to use as they're saying, and then we look at putting it into the budget.
Just a quick update. I know this isn't on the agenda as far as safety goes, but I think it's lumped into that operations. But we have been working with our tech ed department with our laser cutter and trying to fabricate one on site that replicates the one that was suggested. The problem is that we have different sashes and different doorways. They don't all have the same plate template. Just as early as today, we saw a different system with Iowa Grant that has a grommet that basically falls through the tile into the concrete, and then a steel rod goes into the grommet that could just be dropped in and simply creates a door stop or a kick stop, if you would. There's multiple different ideas out there right now, and it's prudent, I think, to stay in front of all the different ideas that are emerging, right down to a safe room inside of elementaries that could be a reading pod, but it doubles as a fully bulletproof area with its own lighting and HVAC, power and so forth, so that kids are in a bulletproof environment in the corner of a classroom. A lot of these things are being floated as ideas. They're coming almost rapidly as every day. We're getting a new idea of how to make a classroom more secure, more intruder-proof. So part of it is sifting through all of this and coming up with the right solution for Mineral Point, and then learning if we can fabricate that in-house or if we have to buy it at an expense. So we can bring that back next week. We could talk about the things we've investigated. I'm sure in the next 30 days there'll be some other additional thoughts, ideas, suggestions on how to improve school classroom security. This doesn't need to be something that we wait a year for, but it would be wise just before we jump to the first invention to just make sure that that's the right solution.
And can I just it wouldn't require the board to make any kind of, a $50 purchase to get is this something that can be handled, I would hope, at an administrative level or even a committee level, that it isn't coming to an entire meeting to be hashed out again?
To that point,
you've got the
we're going to try to
authority.
make one rather than pay $50 for one. We're just going to try to make it in-house.
But you have the authority.
Yeah.
You don't need our
No.
permission.
Right.
You can just go ahead and do that.
Right.
But with it being at the forefront of parents' thoughts and fears, I do think it makes sense to have a safety report as a regular part of every board meeting, to say what we are doing, what we're planning to do. Something has to be done, and people want to hear what you're doing. And I know we're doing a lot and we continue to do things, but there's always more that can be done.
So was that based off my email?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
You could have answered me, you told me you were going to do that.
I
I had no idea.
Actually, yours was the second email we received from that, so we were already in fabrication when we got your email. So, yeah. And again, there's other ideas that I think I like the Iowa Grant solution actually better. I think it's going to be less, it's going to be easier to fabricate, to put a grommet into a cement floor and then drop a rod in.
Yeah.
Because again, placing this into and expanding it and getting into, so we're investigating a lot of things and we don't really have an answer yet, but we will keep looking at things.
And to plug this design workshop on March 20th, if any parents or community members have security ideas that would involve some sort of design aspect, come to that and tell the architects and the designers.
I would also suggest, just to clarify the earlier comment about the swap and, school I hope the safety committee at the board level is also sort of data-driven on that, so we're giving people real, information on how to keep their kids safe, what real concerns are, and maybe what aren't. And I don't think that it's not a real concern, that is not what I was implying, but I am just saying school safety is a big animal. It doesn't just have, you know, one or two components, suicide or gunshot. I mean, there's a lot of things that that can encompass. So giving people information so they can be doing more in their own homes and on their rides to school and et cetera.
So what we could do, Larry, is just, you know, let's just afterwards talk about having an operations meeting where maybe parents can just come and talk about their concerns. And we just get their concerns, so we just have a great listening session with parents.
Is there a superintendent's report in this agenda?
There is not, it was just the recognitions tonight.
Because maybe right now would be a good time to talk about that 800 number that you set up. I mean, that seems like it addresses security.
Sure. There is an incident reporting system where you can now text, use a website, phone call in, or the fourth way?
Email.
Email, thank you. A report of an incident. The incident could be something that is a threat to the school or to a person. It could be an incident that is a safety hazard or issue, or it could be something that is a bullying incident. You could also put in a positive incident, something that happened that you want to recognize somebody else for doing something good. All of those can be done in 2 of the 4 forms. You can do that anonymously. So if you don't want to be known as the person, you just want to make sure that the threat is aware, you can go to our website. It's under the Students tab, and then you pull down to the incident reporting system. There is a video out there that I put together that walks you through the steps on how to create a report, and we monitor that daily. Our entire administrative team will receive a flag when there is a report of some type, and then we'll respond accordingly with the right building level and approach to the response. So that is something that's been implemented. There are other things that are in the process of being deployed that I will certainly bring back in a safety report in our next meeting.
And that's something all the students have been made aware of.
Yes.
And parents?
And parents, correct.
Flyers up around the school.
Has it been used? Have people done anything?
We have not received a report through the system yet. It's been operational for about a week now. That's about right. I think it was deployed last Tuesday, a week ago Tuesday. I think it was the announcement in the first hour.
I think
2 weeks,
Yeah,
2 weeks now. So at this time, we have not received any reports.
I think between the March and the April meeting, Kelly,
Pardon?
we'll convene an operations meeting between the March and April for board meeting.
Yeah, between.
Maybe
yeah.
after the design
Yep, yep,
workshop.
yep.
All right,
Thank you.
thanks for bringing it up, Kelly. Great idea with that. And monthly safety report too. Enrollment report.
As part of the elementary school planning committee, there was some discussion about getting some more reliable data about our future enrollment in the district. In your board packet, page 41, is the summary of that report. I won't go through the entire report, but I'll just summarize for the board at large. The district level projections was done by the Applied Population Lab. That's out of the University of Wisconsin system. And they look at not just how many kids are in your school and enrolling up, but they also look at a couple different models that they use to project, as well as birth rates, which gets much more comprehensive than any internal mechanisms, because we're not familiar with birth rates across the county and across the state. In summary, the reports that you see there, the accuracy is about 5 years. I wouldn't go much with any certainty beyond the year of 2022. It starts to get a little bit less reliable according to their summary and analysis, but it's pretty reliable in the next short term, so 3 to 5 years. You can have some confidence that those numbers are accurate. Projections over the next 5 years suggest that the 4K to 12 enrollment overall is going to remain steady to slightly declining. More specifically, at the elementary school, it's likely to slightly decline over the next 5 years. The middle school enrollment will remain steady for the next 4 to 5 years, and then followed by decreasing enrollment unless there should be some change in our elementary activity. And the high school enrollment is projected to increase due to those large class sizes that are currently in our middle school and elementary school. So taking all of those factors into account gives you a little bit better of a snapshot of overall enrollment. Again, recognizing that if our population were to decrease, let's just say it's 10 students, slightly decreasing by 10 students in pre-K through 5, all of those kids don't come out of just one class where you can reduce a teacher or have an extra classroom space. Oftentimes they're spread across all 5 classes, and 2 kids less in each class doesn't necessarily mean that you would be able to fold the classroom and gain some capacity, or fold the teacher and gain another FTE back. So, you know, it is something that helps our committee, certainly in their recommendations and planning for what future spaces should look like at the elementary. And if you have any questions or comments, this would be a great time.
Is this impacting the recommendation on the reduction in force?
It is not. This report actually came out after the reduction of force, but it certainly has some bearing, I think, for the board to just take into consideration. But I don't think in isolation I would look at any of the numbers past the first 3 to 5 years with any reliability.
Is this report sort of in general about the area, or is it Mineral Point specific?
Mineral Point specific.
And had they looked in the past to see people moving to Mineral Point from other places?
Yeah. Yeah. We looked 10 years backwards and 10 years forward, and then we were able to do some of their projections. And the Applied Population Lab does this specifically. They are commissioned to do this work for school districts across the state. So they have some pretty predictive models. It's one of the better services that schools often rely on. We have not used this service in the 7 years that I have been here, because we've been able to somewhat predict just by rolling up our numbers and the grades. But for the purpose of planning in elementary school, long-term planning, the committee desired something that was looking at birth rates specifically, both in the county and across the state, and what are the trends, and making sure that we've got the most accurate and reliable data possible to base our decisions on.
And long-term trend is declining.
Long-term trend is declining, slightly steady to slightly declining, yeah.
And that's 10 years out.
It does project 10 years out, but again, they caution in their own summary to not look much beyond 5. Trends can change, just like a recession. You could have a housing boom that decides to open up in Mineral Point and everything changes. So 5 to 10 years is a long time out.
It would be interesting to see, go back 5, 6 years, Luke, when PMA were giving us their budget forecast. I don't know what they were using for enrollment. It was flat.
I think it's always been flat for as long as I can remember, their projection.
All right. Moving on, budget development timeline.
The budget development timeline, I just want to share a couple of pieces for you. We continue to move forward in the budget development process. I did hand out to each member some revised assumptions that I want to share with the board. And I'll put that up here as well. So every year we go into the budget with some planning assumptions. And for the board's information, there are some assumptions that we have changed over time as we continue to do our planning forward. The first is the resident in-district student enrollment. Currently from November, our third Friday count in November to our third Friday count in January, our overall FTE is up 11 FTE. So that's just in a 6-month trend. Now, again, the projections that you had had in your enrollment projection they only looked at third Friday count in September. So they were not taking into consideration already an increase in FTE from September to January. So as we look at these trends, we know that in the DPI model for school funding, they give you a 3-year average of enrollment, and that's how your funding is based on. So just taking a third of those 11 kids that are right now currently in our district in our increase in FTE from September to January, a third of those increases by 3. Well, what does that really mean in our enrollment assumptions? Well, if you're up 3 FTE, that's an additional roughly $30 of revenue. That's worth capturing in our model to make that assumption rather than it being just flat. We can stay conservative and keep it at a net zero, no change, but I think it's safe with those kids in our district at this time to look at an increase of 3 students and not capturing the entire 11, because again, the formula averages those over a 3-year period and we only get a third of that funding. The other changes that today you might have noticed, the governor was in Riverdale School District,
And we actually had a chance, Lisa Hay happened to be here for another reason, and myself and Mitch Wainwright and Joel Doy jumped on telepresence, and the governor was actually in our school district via telepresence to say hello and to see how our Boost Consortium operates, where we deliver courses across telepresence. But his real reason for being in Riverdale today was that he approved and signed on the now state law for sparsity aid and raising the low limit revenue cap. We don't qualify for the second of those two, but the first of those two, the sparsity aid, increases the per pupil amount allocated by $100 per kid. So if we have an increase of $100 per student as of today, we have an additional $70,000 worth of funding based on a school population of 700 kids. So again, that is another assumption that we didn't have when we started our process back in January. It was just loosely talked about, but the governor had originally denied that additional $100 and now today approved it. Salary and wages, we now know that the consumer price index for schools for negotiating contracts is 2.13%. That's the consumer price index, which represents the amount of inflationary costs or increases over the past year. And so when you bargain a collective bargaining unit, that would be the base wage increase. That does not take into account steps or lanes for either support staff that would be moving up 50 cents, or it doesn't take into account a teacher that would be moving down a step or getting an extra lane for getting a master's, for example. So I'm looking at, on average, an increase of around 3%. That is just something I was able to lock in a little bit tighter now that we do some preliminary work knowing what the CPI is. And then at the bottom, we have not traditionally, health benefits. Before I get to the bottom, we did get just recently our insurance health benefit renewal rates, and for the second straight year, we are at 0%. I think we've had 0% 3 of now 4 years. We are an extremely outlier, beyond an outlier, which is hard to explain why we are able to command those continued benefit increases of 0% when a lot of other districts are looking at double-digit increases. But I would maintain that it's because our staff is a healthy staff, but continues to use our insurance plan with a lot of wisdom in that they're using general care physicians rather than going to the emergency rooms. We haven't had any significant health issues, and so we'll continue to try to hold on to that trend as long as possible. But that is something that we had originally assumed it would be a 6% increase, and now we can lock in at a 0% increase. So that is a significant savings for the district this year. Also, we have never built in a contingency. I think it's wise with a lot of uncertainty from year to year. A lot of the safety things that are coming up this year, we didn't budget for, but we're finding a way to make it work. And I think it's wise if a large piece of equipment goes down, a security issue comes up, that we try to carry a contingency in our budget. Traditionally, we've budgeted right down to the last dollar. So that would be something I'd like to build in. The last is the growth reduction factor. Before you tonight is a reduction in force. I don't want you to think of that as a potential $65,000 savings, but that's an average salary and benefits for a teacher in a mid-range. I would think of it more as salary cap. That's kind of our salary cap, and we would have an additional $65,000 worth of salary cap to reallocate in some other way. So I wouldn't suggest, unless the board should tell us otherwise, that we reduce by 65. It would just be transferring that salary cap revenue into another strategic initiative or move for staffing. So that's something that we'll talk about later in the agenda, but that gives you the number of roughly what a staff and benefits would be at $15,000 for roughly health insurance, and then about a $45,000 to $55,000 salary for a midterm teacher. So those are some of the updates that I wanted to give you as a board, as we look forward in our assumptions.
Any questions? The Studer Education Initiative?
Yes, thanks. The Studer Education piece, I wanted to just draw your attention to this. Member Gunlock was at the WASB Association, had a chance to listen to the State Superintendent of the Year, which was from Menominee Falls, talk about Studer Education, and this is it's a widely successful program that layers in over the top of your strategic plan and initiatives. And there was a lot of interest to look at what that might look like in Mineral Point. And so I did do some investigation and follow-up as a result of the attendance at that particular workshop.
You have before you basically the information about what student education is, and then there's a proposal for Mineral Point. If you looked at kind of the proposal itself, I think I had it mapped out for you on page 48 and 49 of the board packet. Essentially what student education does is it kind of comes in over the top of your current planning and gives it some robustness and some fidelity. There will be 6 on-site visits that's coupled with monthly calls to your leadership team and your superintendent. Gives you access to stakeholder surveys, and then does some online scorecard tools to show how well you're making progress toward implementing your strategic plan. The cost is, we knew it was going to be expensive. That was one of the things that was drawn out early in the process. But for Mineral Point, there is no break for a small rural school as there is a large suburban school or urban school. It would be roughly $38,000 annually, and it would be probably a minimal 3-year commitment to really implement the program with fidelity. It's not a 1-year and done. That's a pretty exorbitant amount. That's more than our entire Title II budget for professional development. So I would not plan to carry that forward in this particular year unless the board had some interest in really going deeper and discussing it further.
I'd like to speak to this. I was really excited when I sat in on her meeting, and it not only overlays the strategic plan, how she explained it was that she's been in education for a long time, and it gives the tools to all staff, all teachers, right down to the janitor, right down to support staff, everyone, the tools and the training needed to make you accountable and your students successful. And it uses data, which has always been difficult for me to decipher. How it was explained was that once those tools are in place, and it is done by data, everyone's accountable. And she said, and then you are rated as certain kind of performers, and you start out right where you're at as a teacher and as a student, and then you start to measure from there. So one example she gave was, let's say you're a 3rd grade teacher and you're really successful with your students, but you say something about your partner. Just one thing about how your partner teaches, and it's negative. She said, you are now a low performer, and that gets corrected. Or you don't stay within the leadership program.
How do they know what you say?
Well, it's documented.
Are they,
if someone,
are they recording the classes?
No, they're not. But if that gets talked about, you would go into the superintendent or the principal, and you would be talked about. And they put you under that. You're not at a high-performing professional. You go down there and you change your behavior. So it's behavior-related, it's how you relate to your students, how you relate to your peers, how you relate to everyone in the building, and everyone becomes a leader. Yes, it is costly, and that was one of the things that was the first thing that was asked by a person in the audience. And he said, how can you afford this? And she said, once we decided to do this and the school board decided that this was thing to do, we bought into it, and we didn't buy anything for 2 years. They purchased nothing. They made sure. And it's all, the program's also through, Menominee Falls also is a pilot program for Carnegie Mellon Business School, is that correct? So they have a partnership with them also, so they get a lot of input. But when I got done listening to her speak, I went over to the Studer lady and I said, I know this may be expensive, but how could we get this cost down to make it beneficial? And I said, could this be done through CISA? And she goes, I've never worked through CISA, but there may be something that could be done through CISA, or you could partner with other schools. So, it really helped me understand the importance of data and how important it is for the students, how it is important for everyone in the building. I mean, it's right down to the janitor. I mean, our process as a board would be so streamlined, it would be unbelievable. So how you could move ahead would be just phenomenal. So once you get all that in place, and you have the, the data and the training and the tools for the teachers, students become successful, and then you can start exploring more technology, or how to have other, community more relationships. It just builds upon itself when there's a buy-in. And people, the whole school bought into it. The board bought into it, the community bought into it, and yes, Menominee Falls is a wealthy community. But that doesn't mean that as a small community, we can't find a way to make something like this happen or be successful. And I know a lot about education, and I know that things come and they go, and everybody's, there's a new pedal to be had, and that's what long-term teachers always say, here we go again. And she even said that, she goes, if I would have had this 30 years ago, because she said, there's always been this missing piece. And we could talk to every teacher and every administrator, and they would all say the same thing. There are things out there, but there just seems to be this missing piece. And anyway, they found it to be successful and something that's worthwhile to do. So if we don't even vote on this, there's a buy-in, there can be a buy-in to this. One way is that in the fall, there's a 2-day program at Menominee Falls that some teachers or some board members or whoever chooses want to go. They only take so many, and the slots fill up, and I was going to go myself. It was the 14th and 15th of this month. Well, that's this week. I'm sorry, that's this week. But it was like $200 and some. It seemed reasonable to me, but but you have to this would be just the step into it, is this introduction to it. We wouldn't have to say we're going to do it. We would say in the fall that we're going to go and explore this. So teachers would have a say into it, maybe an assistant. I mean, we would need everyone to have a say in this and understand how important or how successful it is. And they committed to that. They didn't buy anything for 2 years. That's a huge commitment to, they wanted this overlay on everything before they did anything else. And it sounded reasonable to me. I got excited about it.
Who keeps the data? Our
It's-
people or they do?
We do.
We have to
They give you
plan
the tools for the data.
how much time it's gonna take from our teachers.
Once it gets rolling in the tools, it'd be very easy. How she explained it, and just in one instance, let's say, and we may have this in place, so you can speak to this or not, but, so, one example she gave was, well, let's say we have I'm going to use 3rd grade again. A 3rd grader who is performing, and I don't know how they do their numbers because everyone grades differently, but let's say in reading, one is performing at an 8 and we want them to be a 10, and one is at a 3. Well, they know they monitor this like every 8 days, so like every 2 weeks, so they know that how much to focus on the number 8 score and then intervention on the number 3 score. So it helps with intervention sooner. For me, if I were a teacher, it would be valuable because then I think once it's implemented, you seriously would get to know your students better, and not only that, but then you could focus in on how that student likes to learn. And then what you would see groups of students who like to learn this way. So, I just see it as being successful. And that's my story. I got really excited about it. Takes a lot for me to get excited.
It does.
Does this work in tandem with the PLC program?
Yes,
PLC?
Yes, it's, Luke, if I'm right, it's an overlay. PLC is a part of how we teach. This is how to get the data that's driven to make everyone successful. So down to budgets. right down to budgets, because operations had a budget and they had to answer to it. She talked about how part of operations talked about, you know, is it cheaper for us to plow the snow or not plow the snow? Well, they did studies like that. Well, it was cheaper to do it in-house. They did a study with this data on whether it was cheaper to cook and do in-house meals for children instead of having an independent contractor. They said it was cheaper for them to have cooks. It wasn't, so.
Ultimately though, Studer doesn't bring those, I mean, Studer brings the principles to bring the culture in here that would be a constant, continuous improvement culture.
Yes.
So, I mean, Studer isn't bringing examples of how we can save money. What they would be bringing is professional development opportunities and leadership development opportunities to our staff to
And
help them
programs.
understand, you know, really governance and how to have a culture of constant improvement and excellence. And then it you know, gives you that framework, which then will lead to people having conversations. Am I right in that?
Correct.
Studer, you know, they do this for healthcare and other things. It's not just an education.
Yes, well, it's
thing,
based
but-
off of healthcare. Carnegie Mellon and Studer, they decided that let's use the data that all the healthcare uses it, and let's see if we can apply it towards education. So and they did that, and by tools, I think part of it is the collection of the data is part of the tools, and that's part of the cost, not just the training, and it's part of how to use that data to get it implemented, so that's part of it.
That was my question, Kelly, the fee, I mean, over the course of 3 years plus administrative costs.
It's expensive, but what we have, but I think it would be beneficial in the fall to go see how it works. And Studer would be willing, like when I went up to her and I said, you know, have you ever had CISA? She goes, no, but you know, maybe there's a conversation there. Could you ever team up schools together? Because we're a pretty small school, we might not be able to handle it. So I don't want, it doesn't cost that much to investigate it
No,
and
not
see
at all.
how it works. But ultimately, you know,
Do you know if the fee is the same for a large school versus?
that I don't know. And I didn't get in, is it Luke?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I tried to talk to them about population of kids and scope. We have 2 buildings, some schools have 7 elementaries and 2 middles and 1 or 2 high schools.
Yeah.
Unfortunately,
Yeah.
the scaling it up or down isn't the strategy, it's embedding the program and culture. Some of the top school districts in the state, state superintendents of the year from Pewaukee, Menominee Falls, have used this model and successfully integrated it to be part of what was their strategy to become so successful. I don't disagree that there would be some huge upside and benefit for layering this in over the top of what we did if the money were no object. And so before we would put that kind of investment over a 3-year period, I would want 7 board members to be equally excited about this. And I think the only way to get that understanding, to your point, is to get invested in what it is and what it's not. So this is the best literature they can provide to get deep into it. Perhaps you want to table it if you haven't looked at the 9 principles and the strategies to really understand it more. But I think you have to see it and talk to people that have implemented it.
And maybe there's an alternative to this that's not as expensive.
I would certainly look at the CISA option.
Yes, well,
Or
or Studer working with
Well, I think that there's also
CISA. Yeah.
other leadership type agencies that use Studer principles to develop the same type of thing, so maybe there is just a cheaper.
And the list of those schools, they're CISA 9, it looks like they've adopted it
Yeah, in general,
here.
yes.
I don't know what that means.
So-
Where that's at, where's CISA 9?
But it may not be this program, but the idea that there is an overlying thing that gives everyone tools to be a leader. And total investment in it. And it doesn't cost that much to research it. As a board, we spend very little money on education of ourselves. I mean, we don't spend that much. And what's done is usually, you know, a lot of it, I mean, I'm an info folk, but, you know, maybe in the fall we look at this, and maybe if it's, in the meantime, there's other programs that we could look at.
Not an action item tonight. I brought it up for discussion. I wanted to just follow up with your inquiry because I do believe there's some merit to it, but to your point, it's not something I'm going to put in the preliminary budget for next year, but we should continue to study it.
Strategic plan?
Strategic plan has found some information that's specifically to the board, and one community member had reached out, I think, to you, Member Steph, is about part of the strategic plan that has to do with listening sessions as part of our strategy. And the specific strategies will develop a listen back portion to the board meeting. This is specifically for the board in the strategic plan. And that listen back to the community by hosting a regular listening, learning, and brainstorming session beyond the routine and usual business of the board meeting. And so the inquiry was, is that forthcoming? When might that happen? So this is an opportunity for us to discuss if that should happen, how that should happen, when that should happen, in what form might that take place. And then after that discussion, I'll share with you some of the action plans that came out of our professional development under this strand, some recommendations from the staff at large that thought, and again, this is around the strategy of connecting the board and community, some of their action plans that they thought you might want to consider as well. So I can put those out there now, or we can try to pick some of these off one at a time. But the one that is explicitly stated right in the strategic plan, that's not necessarily an action plan embedded underneath that, is hosting listening sessions outside of the regular board meetings. I mentioned one school district that has listening sessions with staff prior to the board meeting, so they would come in 45 minutes prior to. Board members would be separated at different tables throughout the library, for example. This is very minor, we can make it our own. Community members, staff members, let's just say we're talking to the elementary building only, would come in, be able to sit down at different tables with different board members. There could be a script of guiding questions, but more often than not, it's what's on your mind, what brings you in, what kinds of things are concerning you, what should we be thinking about as a board strategically for the elementary building. You could have another night that's middle school, high school, where they come in 45 minutes prior to a board meeting and do something similar. So gathering feedback straight from the stakeholders. There could be a third one similar to that could be a community at large, or maybe you want to take it off-site and do something in a little different environment that might be more welcoming and inviting. But opportunity for the board to discuss what that might look like. It was an explicit part of our strategic plan is to host listening sessions outside of the board meeting.
So we've got a pretty big group of community members here. I mean, it'd be interesting to ask to see if they have input on what they would want to see from a listening session. We used to do the Copy for Community, and it was really sporadic and not, I mean, there were times when we got a ton of people there, and then other times when no one came. So it wasn't consistent. Would anyone like to share if they have an idea that would be best for them? If not, we can keep sort of brainstorming it, but I'd be interested in getting info. I mean, things I've heard about our meetings is that it's right at dinner time. It's hard for working parents. It's hard for working, whether you're parents or not, it's hard for people that are working to come home and get right back into a long meeting. I've heard that our meetings are too long, so coming to express yourself in the beginning isn't ideal.
I think having a topic like school safety or special ed makes some sense. Otherwise, as you know, many years ago when we did coffee with the school board or whatever it was, we got deep into the weeds. People were talking about specific items that were being served at lunch that they didn't want to see anymore and things like that. So I think there's a danger if you just, tell us any random thought you have about the school. We have school board meetings that go for 4 or 5 hours. If this is a suggestion of having another meeting, really long meeting on absolutely anything, I don't think it's a great plan. But if it's tailored to a specific topic, then it makes some sense to me.
Well, and I think along those lines, there probably needs to be, whether it's a board member or a community member that is facilitating. I mean, I think it's hard to have an open meeting and just assume that there's going to be guidelines and etiquette when there's just, people don't know. So if it's not facilitated well, it could turn into exactly what we're trying to avoid or really long or whatever it may be. So.
And in the strategic plan, I mean, were there specific areas that you want to target? maybe those are the
Go
ones
through
that
that
should.
plan and talk about certain aspects of the strategic plan as a guiding topic overall, and then take other questions. This did come up in the professional development session as an action plan as well, so it's kind of like a ×2 that they thought this was an action plan or strategy. And they suggested perhaps the week prior to the board meeting, so you can have a listening session and then take that feedback or comment into the board meeting. However, the agenda is not usually developed that far in advance, so they may not know to speak to the agenda, but you would have an opportunity to hear and listen to the most current events or concerns on parents' or community's mind prior to coming into the board meeting and report out during that communication parent or that board communication piece.
I could see a semi-annual public input session, maybe out, even outside this boardroom, even if we move it into the cafeteria. One in the spring and one in the winter. Again, Lisa, I like your idea of having specific topics, safety, academic achievement, special ed. I don't know if we do 2 in the spring and 2 in the fall, or is this something that, are we thinking more monthly?
Could start with something and see how it's attended, and if the attendance falls off, you space them out a little
Right.
more. If it stays consistent and there's a lot of interest, you continue to have quarterly or monthly. I don't know. It's new territory.
Well, when we get to our committees, more specific committees, or we tailor them differently, could those committees, like Larry and I are gonna have one now about safety. And that'll be a listening session. Those committees, maybe curriculum, that comes under, maybe that's a special ed, but maybe those committees take the reins more to do that kind of things, maybe once or, whatever they think important. Like for us, we think the safety is important now, to have that listening session and discussion. Maybe that's just something we decide when we get the new board and we get, the committees more differently defined.
Sounds like a good idea.
So to kick this off, Kelly, with the next, Lisa, read just a little
Yeah, I would, I know this is on the strategic plan to have these workshops, and I really like the idea of more community communication, but I do sense that maybe there's not a clear understanding of, or maybe it's an answer without a question, like perhaps the board or the new board members, along with the, incumbent members, should think about what needs they're actually trying to address, and instead of like, oh, we need more communication, that it seems like, I don't feel like that's really well defined.
Right.
I like the idea generally, but I don't know, I guess I would encourage some of that.
I'd be interested in hearing what the teachers thought.
Professional development opportunity was an afternoon workshop. It started at roughly, I think it was 12 o'clock and ended at around 3:30 to 4 o'clock, somewhere in there. The first half of it was to get deep into the strategic plan and kind of flesh out what's in it and what part of it, kind of call each person and to kind of affirm some of the things that we have in the strategic plan. But the second part got a little bit deeper into then picking an area of either expertise, an area that people were interested in, or a place where they're just knowledgeable about, and suggest action plans for each one of those sub areas. And the action plans that came up and around the board of the community was, the first we had mentioned is holding that listening session. The second was to include a student or class officer at the board meeting. They didn't flesh it out further to define what that might look like, but that could be, as a potential action plan to include a student voice at the table. They suggested as an action plan to restrict the time limits of board meetings to be less than or equal to 2 hours. And I don't know what that means. If you go past 2 hours, does that mean the meeting just stops and we pick up and add another meeting that month, or what? But that was a suggestion. Creating a board handbook so that you have board operations, and much like an employee handbook, it would be for the school board specifically. They had mentioned, defining what your meeting norms are and so forth inside of that handbook. An additional action item was to find a more community-friendly location to have your board meetings in. I thought this was a nice, friendly location, but maybe not everybody thinks the same. The other is 3 more to attend WASB events as a board. That's the Association of School Boards and their professional learning and development trainings. There was, then the last two items were more about board conduct, specifically around transparency and about when to go into a closed session. They wanted an action plan to be a little bit more clear about that. And then the last one was just it was the last one, it's probably at the last minute, but they just wrote down confidentiality. So I can't interpret what that means, but they would like to see an action plan around board confidentiality. So there's some other areas that you might decide to do a work session on as a committee or a subcommittee. Could take a look at some of these action plans and try to develop some things around that. But I think this is part of our strategic plan. We want to bring back something that we're going to do, and we're going to monitor it and check back in with ourselves and or the new board in 6 months or a year and see how that's going and make shifts to continue to do it if it's working well, or shift into something else if it's not working so well.
I think as part of the May meeting, that's kind of our kickoff for our planning for the year and our development meeting. We should schedule the listening sessions, so they're scheduled and the whole board knows when they are, and they're in advance, so we're aware. Whether it's 1 quarter or whatever, that's, I mean, to be fair, with 3 new board members, it's probably a better discussion for the new board.
Look, before that, when we have our operations meeting, we are going to hold a safety listening
Oh, that's
session.
absolutely.
Absolutely.
I'm just saying, it'd be nice to have them scheduled for everybody to know prior to, on Thursday, we're gonna have this listening session. So that the public can be aware, okay, next month, this date, that's an important topic to me, I need to be free.
And a great tool that was discussed at the beginning of this meeting is a parent organization. We used to have them in Mineral Point. We've talked about it even at the start of this board. We talked about it. If I'd love to see that start up again. Parent-teacher organization.
I've talked to parents about it, and they say get something started and I'll do it, and I'm like, I'm a board member. If you want a parent teachers association, all you have to do is research it. There are some that do, there are ones that cost a lot of money to belong to, there are some that doesn't. And the nice thing about having an organization is that there's guidelines on how to do it. And then you carry through, like, you know, you're president for one time and then somebody else comes up. But there's a framework for that. But as a board, I'm a board member. I'm not going to do the parent-teachers organization and give it to you and say, here you go now. No, that's not my job. That's not our job as a board. The idea of a parent-teachers organization is that parents collectively get together, and then when there's an issue, that 1 or 2 people come to the meeting on the parent-teachers organization, and they say, and they talk about it. Instead of 10 parents showing up, there's one voice that comes and gives their opinion.
It's a great way to filter.
And it's a great way to filter. But as a board member, I'm not going to do your work for you as a parent.
I agree with what Kelly just said. The only difference I would say is I'd like to have 10 or 20 come and only have 1 or 2 speak. But I'd like them all to come. And if they come up with something else in between, they're certainly welcome to speak up.
Maybe as a board, we know the parents that are involved, and maybe it's just a discussion with them parents, and I think through that we could possibly find a couple of parents to kick this thing off.
Google's really, really resourceful.
What's the intent though? I mean, what are we as a board hoping to gain from a PTA?
Input.
Input, I mean, exactly these listening sessions that it looks like the community wants the board to have. I'm not against the listening sessions, one a month, I don't care. But they gotta be a quality.
The PTA to facilitate the listening session?
Possibly, maybe outside
They'd have
of
their
the
own
board.
listening sessions and then show up with their concerns at ours.
But so it makes, I mean, for parents though, that's
Yeah.
another layer of things that they have to do to give input to the board. So I mean, as someone who will no longer be on the board, I would like to be able to just give the board input and be able to come to listening sessions or do whatever, rather than forming another association or another council to then filter that through.
You're at the
So
top of my list.
I think that,
What'd you say?
you're on my list too, Larry.
What'd you say?
I think that, I think we just have to understand it, and, I mean, it goes
Yeah,
back
I
to
know,
the point
I
of
understand.
what transparency is for, and what the intent is. I think you guys wanna hear what the people have to say. I do think that we as a community, we can work to, do some of this work outside of these meetings where people can feel more confident and comfortable coming here to give their input or call. So that's work I think that I'm gonna be doing even if you weren't on my list.
Anything else on the strategic plan? That was the crux of it, wasn't it? All right.
And for transparency, I'm leaving in a half an hour, which way I'd already worked out, so just 8:30 is my limit today.
Policy 334.
Just to bring to the board's attention, policy 334 does have in the month of March that there should be a report given to the board with regards to the list of classes that we plan to offer, the classes that are required, the electives, possible additions to the curriculum or possible reductions to the curriculum. We have moved our enrollment process forward this year to be more responsive to end-of-year procedures and trying to get schedules out earlier than we have in the past. And even with that, we are still in the process of tallying and putting together a master schedule, and we will have that very soon, and for sure by the April board meeting, and we can give that full report in a more comprehensive manner than we would be able to right now. So I do believe this report, or the policy, should probably reflect April, because much before April, that means we're starting our scheduling process in December. We haven't even gone through first semester yet. Kids aren't really thinking about classes for next year, but I will have this report for you in April, and if there's anything that you would like specifically included in that report, this is a great opportunity to share that with me so I can make sure it happens.
Can we put this policy with April instead of March on the next
We'll do.
agenda?
Okay.
I would like to move that we take the reduction in force and move it up on the agenda since Julie's leaving in half an hour.
You want to do it before the
Yes,
roof?
for the roof.
Okay. Motion made by Lisa. Does anyone have a problem with moving on the agenda?
No, I don't have a problem. Do you have a problem?
Anybody else? Okay, we will just go to that then, Lisa. Approval of reduction in force.
So a reduction in force happens annually as part of the budget development cycle. Annually, we look at staffing levels across the district. We look at possible needs for additions and possible needs for reductions. Typically, it is customary for us to come forward and ask for additional staffing. And that oftentimes is a response to a strategic plan or new needs. Oftentimes, and we've done this in the past, is when we've had a large class with a bubble going through, we've added a staff member to try to keep class sizes reasonable. In this particular case, we have a class size that's coming through at this time that would be comparable to the current class size in kindergarten. Right now, class sizes are 19 or 20, and next year, with a reduction in force, the class sizes would remain at 20. So this is an opportunity for the board to review our current FTE allocation, or full-time equivalency allocations, and we feel comfortable in making a recommendation to reduce force in the elementary building. That again would be a cost avoidance of about $65,000. Again, because we're underneath a revenue cap, we're also then underneath a salary cap. So if we're underneath the salary cap, releasing that salary in the form of a teacher would allow us to reallocate it in other ways to potentially be strategic. And we've heard desires for connecting with kids through things like social workers, adding police liaisons to the elementary building. The strategic plan has the discussion or need to build into the curriculum computer science and Project Lead the Way classes. We know that we may have to add a school psychologist next year if we can't find one bundled with our Director of Pupil Services position. So all of these underneath a salary cap are additional adds or needs or wants that sometimes can't necessarily be filled by just a teacher certification or licensure. So in order to have full flexibility, we're recommending the reduction in force. It keeps the class sizes similar and allows us to have flexibility.
If there is an increase in numbers between now and the end of the school year, or even into the fall, and class sizes go up, we could very well be before the board and ask for an increase in FTE to address that. But right now, we are at roughly class sizes of 13, and that's kind of the trade-off right now, is a class size and a full-time teacher for a couple classes of 13 versus a couple classes of 20.
Did you say that you might, in the next couple months, if this was approved, that you might come back to us and say you want to hire somebody?
If 10 kids were to come into the kindergarten classroom between now and August or September 1st of next year, it would be hard for me to continue to advocate for running that class on 2 sections.
Last year, we had a kindergarten of 40, and then 5 new kids moved into the district, and then you suggested that we hire a new first grade teacher. We hired a kindergarten teacher and a first grade teacher in the last year. But in part because 5 new kids came, and that could happen again.
It could. We've been monitoring this class since pre-K. The numbers were starting at 42, they're now down to 40. So we're halfway through a year and a half of that class. We haven't seen an increase in that number. But in full transparency, if a bunch of kids come into that grade level, we would need to be responsive as a board. This is your opportunity to look at this particular scenario and say that you do or don't feel. Typically we come with wanting more. We're saying at this particular time, we feel like we don't need to advocate for an additional teacher in that class, given the current class sizes. But that's for the board to look at and review and give us the final allocation, knowing that there's a lot of competing interests and needs, and we're under a salary cap.
Your intention is to use that money for something else right away?
Yeah, I would not look at it as strictly a budget reduction. We would look at it as reallocating it in one of the various variety of needs. I've labeled a couple of them, but as an administrative team, we need to keep working through that process. And part of that process first defines, well, how many positions do we have to work with? And once we know that, then we can start to say, well, what are our prioritization of needs? That is also driven by the state statutes, which require a non-renewal process to take place in April with a preliminary notice, and May is a final notice. So if we do make a shift from a teaching position to some other type of position, we do need to bring back a recommendation for you at our next board meeting for you to start that response or that process. So any plan of whether to shift resources, continue to advocate for a teacher in that, or to add a different position that isn't a teacher certification would still be under the board's final authority in April and again in May with the preliminary budget, and then the final budget in October.
We don't have to make a decision until May though.
The reduction in force is a decision that we're asking for now, because if you decide...
Does it have to be made now?
It does, because if we decide we need to go through a non-renewal process that starts in April by state statute and finalizes in May by state statute. So once we get past April, any teacher with a contract will be locked into their contract for the following year. We could not remove them at that point, even if all of our class sizes were to go down.
But if this class would come up, then you're going to come back on another teacher.
Yes, it does buy us some time to look at that. We'd have an additional month, even an additional month after that, because we would be into May before the final non-renewal notice. And if we did have 10 more kids that walked through the door, we would come back with a recommendation accordingly. However, if you just wait until May to decide, well, let's just wait, we've missed the April deadline, and we've missed the non-renewal, there's a process that happens after this before we get to the non-renewal stage that would have to be implemented, and we would be locked into our staffing at that current level. So this is the time of year where we preliminarily start this process. It doesn't conclude until May. Our past year and a half history has said that the classes are not growing by groups of 10s. In fact, they've reduced since last year. But it does start the process of allowing us to be more nimble and responsive to our needs in the district.
So district-wide, Luke, if Matt brought this proposal to you, so I'm just going to say like the middle school and the high school, your principals would bring a proposal to you if they had the same situation.
Mm-hmm. Correct. We had at one of our administrative meetings, and reaffirmed at a second meeting, we looked at all of our staffing needs, additions, and any opportunities for reductions.
All right.
Again, this is something that the board needs to just consider. We have an opportunity for you to reduce staff. We've always added. I've never brought, that I can recall, any staff reductions. One of the criticisms we sometimes receive as a board is that we keep adding teachers, but when we get small class sizes, we never remove them. This is really for the board to decide, what your staffing levels will be next year, and then we'll respond accordingly with repositioning our staff to best fill the needs that we have with the staff that we have available to us.
What's a little confusing to me is that you
Yes.
talked about possibly hiring for different jobs. That
Reading
you're
specialists,
asking
what else?
for us to approve a reduction so that you can then possibly hire for something that you haven't yet determined what that might be, right?
Correct.
Ha-
The board will
I mean, why
ultimately,
can't the board instead say, next month, why don't you present us with some creative options for how to reallocate your staff without letting anybody go?
because in order for us to reallocate the staff, I'm not sure we can do that under the current staffing levels. If you wanted to add another police liaison, or you wanted to prioritize a social worker over that, or you wanted to add computer science programming, that staff levels are capped right now under our state revenue formula. So we don't have any extra. We are already probably going to struggle if we have to add a school psychologist in addition to a director of pupil service. We'll be going up one.
Does it have to be a director?
It does have to be a director by state statute. You need a director of pupil services and a school psychologist on staff or contracted for services.
And the reason that is posted as two is because of the likelihood that we will need to have two versus having someone that.
Very few candidates will have
Right.
dual certification, so we're prepared for that and we can move forward with both roles. If we do find somebody, like our current director, that isn't dual certified, there's a preference there, but
Right.
they also need to be a quality candidate. We wouldn't just take the licensure over somebody that's not quality.
One of the concerns I've heard as people have talked, reached out to me about this was that, are we reducing a teacher to bring in two administrators where one administrator sat before? And I think that that's a call out to say that it isn't necessarily going to be two, but it's a unique licensure opportunity to find someone with both.
But also within that list that you thought of teachers we may need as an instructional person, a reading specialist, there were other things, and I'm like, well, why are we considering those positions if we have people in the grade school who may be able to fulfill that position and we wouldn't have to do any reduction? So you're asking for an addition. We talk about hiring teachers who have dual roles, and then we have those people in place, so we don't have to reduce.
But not necessarily if the creative pieces though, like when they go back to get creative and they say we want to have a social worker, a teacher may not be able to be the social worker in the school. So, I mean, what I see in this strategy is that we're giving the administrators the opportunity to decide based on the strategic plan about innovative and excellence and innovation related to academics. This gives flexibility to hopefully use the teacher that we have, but possibly open it up to, I mean, we can't move a teacher into a police liaison position if that's what we determine we need. So I see where this is coming from. It's a tough pill.
We may not have to fund the police liaison, that may come through federal funding.
Right, it seems almost like a false choice. I mean, we did get extra money today, the governor signed that thing, you got 70,000 extra dollars that you did not know you were gonna have before you put this on the agenda.
And we haven't talked about a reduction in any other area that we may be able to do to keep.
We had two resign, where's that money at? They were in the budget, weren't they?
They need to be replaced.
Okay, you're gonna replace them with something similar?
Yes, it might be hard to find an O&M teacher, so we may have to look at contracted services there, but the other position is posted director of pupil services.
But why do we have to let go of a teacher? Why can't it be some other area?
If that's fine, if the board decides not to let go of a teacher, it just means we most likely won't be bringing back a police liaison, a social worker, some of those other things that have other certifications. So we'll just know what our staffing levels are for teaching staff, and then we can't bring back other proposals. You certainly can look at everything that we would prioritize, but given our current staffing levels, we're going to be somewhat locked in with our teaching staff. So that's okay. We'll move forward and bring back recommendations with the teaching staff as it is, or it allows us to look at some other competing interests. Ultimately, in the month of April, when the board looks at this, you'll be looking at the staffing plan as you've proposed it with a reduction in staff or not. And then you'll have the ability to say, well, we would rather prioritize this over that. And at that time, if we don't have the certification or the licensure flexibility, you'd have to use it as a budget add. It couldn't be as a budget replacement.
But you know your license flexibility right now. So that would be helpful if we know that in April. Does that make sense?
This has to be done tonight, I believe.
No, what I mean is just to know what the licensures are, who has,
Yep,
you know what I
Angie-
mean?
Yeah, Angie keeps track of all that, but there are very few people that are going to have certifications in any of the areas that we've heard from community, from the board, or from the administrative team with regards to either being responsive to the strategic plan, or to add safety security measures, or add social workers or connections with kids.
I was just gonna add, Julie said this is a tough pill to swallow, and this was not an easy thing to propose either. Certainly it's not it's something I guess more of a consideration for the board than anything. Just, as Luke said, we're just trying to be transparent. Here's where our sizes, where classes are at. But it's messy. It is what it is. I think the following classes after this, looking at the birth rates, and they're in the 50s again. So we are looking at, if the numbers are accurate, we're looking at three sections over time. So that's one piece of feedback I got. Is this a long-term trend in terms of being able to get 40? It's no. So it's certainly messy in terms of trying to staff in the building as well.
You know, we have substitute teachers in all the schools on a daily basis. I mean, if we're looking for ways to be flexible with the teacher, I mean, we talked in the past about having a super sub, some teacher that's, you know, a regular teacher who could be a substitute every day rather than, you know, relying on substitutes. I mean, it just seems like, or a reading specialist. We've had some teachers that have been part-time reading specialists, part-time teachers. I think we need to figure out ways to be creative and so that we have more elasticity in the staffing model down there, because some years there's 50 kids in a class, some years there's 40, rather than have to hire or let go based on how big the incoming kindergarten class is. It just seems like not very good planning.
Lisa, someone we're kind of working with right now is helping us with that, because we realize the same thing. This isn't.
I'm sure you do.
Yeah, and we don't have the answers, but we're hoping outside resources are going to guide us to just be more responsive and smart about this. But with the tools we have right now, this is what we're.
I just can't support a reduction in force, in part because I'm also hearing this is not, it doesn't sound like it's a long-term problem. If anything, it sounds like possibly not even a short-term problem. So I can't support it.
I just gotta ask a question. So down the road, if we have to replace, we have to fill a psychiatrist position and a pupil services position, and the community wants us to get a social worker, which seems like that seems to be a hot topic right now, well, something we'll have to give. And if the administration is telling us we don't need an additional teacher in a grade, then as a school board, I don't know what the right answer is, but are we doing our job saying we don't want to reduce a teacher because we don't want to make anybody mad? I guess that's what I'm asking.
It's not, I didn't say that I'm not doing it because I don't want to make anybody mad. I can't vote for this because 5 months ago, we were asked to hire a new teacher down there. And 4 months before that, we had a teacher retire and we replaced that teacher. So we just hired 2 people down there. And now, it just not enough time has passed for suddenly we need a reduction in force. I don't see.
And I thought we hired one of the teachers because parents had concerns about class size.
Yes.
So that was, I mean, I thought that was how that was brought to us also. I mean, am I incorrect? Did I remember incorrectly?
And the classes down there, the kindergarten class at 20 pupils in the classroom is higher than our policy. I can understand, I mean, if you had an incoming kindergarten class of 25 in total, or, 20, but they're 40 kids. It's not been a huge decline, and it's a one-time blip, and people might move into town.
So it'll be
Or
13,
open enrollment.
if it stays 3, it's 13 per class, right? And then if we have 5 more in, it
13,
bumps up
13,
to
14.
13 and a half kids. So if 4 move in, am I right?
Yeah, you're right.
Okay. What if 4 move in? That bumps it up to 14, we're 3 short of what our max is. Does that make sense?
All of this makes sense. I mean, everything makes sense. What Larry's saying makes sense. What I think is, the whole thing is, it makes sense on both sides of it. And I think that that's where, I'm, like I said, it's a weird, messy predicament to be in, because we basically, I think as a board, have to align on what data we're going to use to make these decisions and stick to that. Because, when you came in and, I've been a parent out in this audience that has come and advocated for my kid's classroom as well. And, I've loved the ability to come and plea and advocate on the kids' behalf. And at the same time, consistency is what people trust, and transparency too. So it is one of these messy predicaments that I know that I've advocated for accountability and governance for a long time. So when we get an opportunity to be strategic, I sort of enjoy the possibility of it. At the same time, I love every teacher down at the elementary school and think they're doing, good things for our students. So yes, it's messy and it feels gross. And I think maybe for the new board, making sure that we are clear on the data that we're going to use to make decisions like this, so that it's consistent and parents and teachers and everybody is aware, and so they can still come and advocate and still give opinions, but they understand why we make decisions and how we get to that ultimate decision. I think that's important.
I just wanted to reiterate a point that Matt made. This is messy, but it's also something that we do annually. There hasn't been a year that we haven't discussed class size. And what a lot of times happens is reaffirming the position of the board on this topic. So we are just like we were in a bubble situation with big classes, and we could choose to add a third teacher or not. This is an opportunity for us to annually revisit whether we want to continue to have a third teacher for classrooms of 13 or not. So full transparency, we're having this conversation in the open and in the public, and we're discussing it, and we're going to reaffirm our class FTE ratios annually. So if the classes stay at 13, I would expect that we would bring this back before the board to have another look at it and review if they want to continue to staff at that level or not. And so it's not that we're trying to continually put something on the table to pester or frustrate the community or the board. It's just a part of doing our due diligence to annually reestablish our FTE levels. So this is your opportunity to do so. We will respond accordingly. There's no angst or anger in this decision. We just need your direction so we can move forward with our staffing planning.
I move that we not approve the reduction in force.
I second.
Motion by Lisa and a second by Kelly not to approve it. Is everybody clear? Is there any other questions or comments?
I'm just going to comment, kind of along Julie's line, that I'm not going to support the reduction, but I do very much appreciate the administration bringing this to us. It's not easy for them to do. It doesn't play well with the staff, but it's the information we need. And they have been given 7 or 8 other positions of importance, and we have X number of dollars to use, and it's their job to bring us options, and that's what this is an option for us to decide A, B, or C. So while I won't support this, I do support the fact and appreciate the fact that it's here for us to decide.
Any other comments? We'll do a roll call, Angie.
Hay, and the
Yes.
motion is to not approve.
Right.
Yes.
Stevenson,
Yes.
Basting,
Yes.
Bush,
Yes.
Dolphin,
No.
Gunlaw,
Yes.
Stefas.
No. Thank you. school count, no, back up to re-roof.
Christie.
School, high school.
Don't forget me.
Come on up, come on up, thanks for your patience. Christie is here with FEH Design.
Yes.
Christie, is Mitch or anybody from Kramer with you tonight?
No, I'm on my own, but I should be able to answer all the
I'm
questions you guys
confident
are
can.
gonna
Just wanted to
want.
make sure I wasn't missing anybody.
I would like to, I have a handout. Make sure you get enough copies to hand around. Does anybody care for a handout about the rewrite project?
Sure. We'll share one here.
Oh, okay. Okay. It's also up on the screen. Anybody else? Okay. So, bids were opened at Kramer Brothers on March 1st for the re-roof project, and they have reviewed the project bids from the subcontractors. So the handout that you have is a breakdown of the different fees and all of the pieces associated with the very bottom number, total projected cost. So the task we were given was to facilitate an Act 32 energy efficiency added insulation project via a re-roof and water and resolving some of the water mitigation issues. I guess obviously you can read the list. We have general conditions. Due to the ballast, I think I talked about it last time, the ballast may require some structural modifications to the joist configuration.
Is there ballast up there now?
Mm-hmm.
You gonna add more?
No, we're trying to not add any, but due to the uplift forces on the roof, we may have to brace the bottom cord of the joist in the gym and a couple other spaces to make sure that the load is adequately transferred. We have masonry work that is to reduce the water mitigation issues and fix some of the flashing associated with that. We have sealant work at the upper level, which is to reseal, well, first to widen and then reseal the control joints in the masonry. The roof replacement, which is the big dollar item. Metal wall panels and waterproofing. In lieu of doing more complicated step flashing at one instance in the wall, we decided to put metal panel in its place that will give you a more seamless, more watertight, weathertight, warrantyable detail. And then, I guess I have 4 alternates, which I'll get to in a minute. We have performance and payment bonds, construction contingency, the construction fee, and then all of this is under the FEH Design Plus Build umbrella. So we've got Act 32 costs and the FEH design fees. So what I'm bringing you today is the overall cost breakdown, but then I also would like direction on the alternates. So there are 4 alternates listed in terms of pricing. We have perimeter masonry repair and sealant work. That is to add a few control joints and the lower portion of the building. So anything below the roof line we were not planning on touching. So the $25,000 that we're proposing here would be to add some control joints, repair a few locations where the masonry needs it, and then to reseal the control joints and the window and door openings. Your sealant is in need of replacement. It's at the end of its life, so this would be a prudent move in terms of ongoing maintenance. Repairs for leak at southeast wing. I have a couple pictures here. You can see that there's some water infiltration at the box gutter here that's coming down the building, and I can pass this along. But we are proposing a $2,000 fix at some of the gutter locations where the water isn't actually properly sloping at the gutter and it's coming down the face of the building. And then we also have, I missed one, I'm sorry. I skipped one. The brick CMU wash and split face block sealer, that's essentially to clean all of the masonry around the whole building. You have some brick that could use some cleaning and some bushes were removed, so you've got the some split face block that's uneven in color. And then we also have a very small cost to wash and repair the limestone retaining wall at the administrative entrance there.
How much is the brick wall going?
That would be $12,000. And as part of the picture that's going around, you can see that some of the moisture is getting into the split face block, and split face block really ought to have a sealer in terms of moisture resistance. So our recommendation would be to kind of do that all-inclusive as part of the cleaning process. So the goal was to keep our number below $500,000, at least that's what the contract says. So we are currently at $497,800, and that does include, wait for it, a construction contingency of $20,000. So if that's not used, that would then not be requested to be spent. So the bids came in good. We got 5 bids from Kramer Brothers. They were all clustered around. They were competitive. So our recommendation would be to move forward with the project. The contractor is Midwest Roofing.
As a Dodgeville contractor.
Yep. And Kramer Brothers has vetted them and is comfortable working with them.
I did have a chance to.
Like the all-inclusive number, yep.
I just want to share I had a chance to speak with Roger with regards to the project itself and the alternates. Roger had suggested that typically we would do the repair and sealant work probably every 10 years, and we're about 20 years out, haven't done it yet. So he would be tickled if we could get to that part of it, because it just is something that's been delayed because of deferred maintenance and other competing interests. So he would be very approving of the sealant work, the block sealer, the repairs to the leak and the gutter system, and the repairs to the retaining wall.
So you would end up with a shiny, clean building at the end of the project, and you start the new school year with a clean, fresh, complete exterior envelope sealed building.
The board has already approved the roof itself through the Act 32 resolution, so really we're looking for approval of the alternates tonight.
I move that we approve the alternates tonight.
Second.
So we have a motion and a second. Further discussion?
All this falls under the Act 32.
Yep, all-inclusive.
We were actually going further than what we had originally commissioned, and if approved tonight, we'll be able to get more work done because of the competitive bidding process that brought the pricing in underneath the allocated $500,000. So this is spending our dollars wisely and stretching as far as we go.
So the your fees for the Act 32 and the administration fees falls under the contract the board has already signed?
Yes.
We're not over and above any fees? Okay.
No.
All right. The Act 32 fees were included in that contract?
Yep, it was everything less than $500,000 as contractually written.
Okay.
And so this would be the performance review reports as part of the Act 32 work, and kind of the monitoring of the installation.
And at the end of this project, all of our control joints will be replaced. We will have added 4, 5, 6 maybe.
There are just some portions of masonry where you had closer to 50-foot runs, so we would be minimizing any potential cracking that you might be having. I don't know the exact quantity. Okay. But we would also be fixing that lintel that was pushed back. That we saw the one day.
Transom, whatever.
Yep, above the window. There are a couple spots where the masonry is just out of alignment, so we would be rectifying that.
And where I'm going is the entire building, upper level, the lower level, will be sealed, be washed, and we should be good for 20 years
By
plus.
10 plus for the sealant.
10 for the sealant.
It depends on the sealant, but generally it's around 10.
The control joints, those should be 20.
You shouldn't have to modify the control joints. They're there to allow movement. So you might have to replace the sealant, but you shouldn't have to add any or widen any.
Inside 20 years?
Correct, yeah. I mean, usually you don't have to revise any control joints.
Right.
But in this instance, there are maybe too few. So that's requiring the modifications. But I would think moving forward, it would not require any additional control joints, just the sealant in the joints.
What's the Mason, the alternate with the masonry repair and sealant work, was that part of a bid or is that just the price from Kramer's Mason?
Kramer Brothers is do the masonry work themselves, so they did provide a price breakdown, but unfortunately do not have a copy of that. It went through the exact square footage and their cost for labor.
Is that something we can also have a bid or is that just part of?
That's part of their number. I think you get efficiencies of them overseeing the project if they also do the masonry. And they have their own masonry crew.
Any other discussion? Sorry.
I'm sorry, I'll vote.
All right, we will have a roll call.
Hay,
Yes.
Stevenson,
Yes.
Basting,
Yes.
Bush,
Yes.
Dolphin,
Yeah.
Gunlaw. Yes. Stefan.
Yes.
Got unanimous? I feel like I've done something right. I'll take it.
Next time, go to work.
Yeah, I'm really excited. Thank you, everybody, for this.
Thank you. I look forward to working with you this summer.
Oh, did we want to talk timeline?
Don't we have to?
Oh, sure, go ahead.
Well, technically, it's all under the umbrella of the contract for design plus building through the Act 32.
We don't have to approve the contract.
Correct. It's technically already been approved, but I wanted you to be aware of who we're moving forward with, so everybody's on the same page and clarify the scope. So I think the text is a little misleading on your agenda.
So the timeline again, this will be complete by the start of
Yes.
19.
August 17th is the date they have to complete the construction and close out.
There it is, it's up on the screen. So construction will start June 4th and will be done August.
And then after that completion, we would see you back in roughly December for your first Act 32 report.
Yep.
With the follow-up in the following September of 19.
Yes, and through the construction administration process, FDH will be on site to confirm that what's happening is in line with our documents. To make sure that you're getting what you're expecting.
So we could potentially have monthly or bi-weekly operational meetings, just to touch in with a portion of the board if wanted.
Yeah, if you have a requested meeting date scheduled, we can do that, but I would think once a month with then digital communication
In between.
beyond that.
Okay.
And there's a good summary sheet and approval of roofing contractor. That's something.
That was pretty much taken care of
Okay.
in that last motion.
All right.
Nothing further needed.
Moving on, thank you, Christie.
Thank you.
Safe travels.
Yeah.
Would you email me this signed?
Yeah,
Okay.
I got it.
Just checking.
I'll make a note.
Okay, thanks everybody.
That's the two-day workshop, correct? Okay.
Yep, I was here for action, so I'm good moving forward with it. We have a bunch of maps to print out. and some
So you want me to put a
research.
signature on it right now before you go?
What's
Do
that?
you have a live copy? You want me to just put a
Okay,
signature on
if
it?
you want to. Don't want
Yeah,
to
let's do it.
make your meeting any longer than it
Let's
is.
take a fax them.
I'll send you a copy tomorrow, or this evening. Thanks everyone for your patience.
Will they be staging a lot of materials here on site?
Yes, there'll actually be, I think you're at the meeting, there will be a scaffolding on the north side of the gym for the primary entrance, and then I'm hoping that they'll be able to stage a lot on the roof if we designate certain areas that are structurally capable, but there will be some masonry that'll likely have to be staged. But they will fence it and make sure that nobody can get into mischief on site.
I don't know if you would know, would they plan on using the parking lot for some of that?
You know, I can check. Do you have any preferences?
Well, I just think of,
Don't want to get in the way of the sports events that are going to be happening.
over the summer, there's a time when they'll try to seal coat and re-stripe
Okay.
some of the parking areas, and if they're gonna stage, I would contact Roger
Okay.
if they're gonna use
Yes.
the parking lot to stage, so he can tell you which parking lot to put the materials on.
That sounds great. Don't want to get in the way and have to move things a bunch of times.
I'm sure there will be some coordination with Roger and the contractors. Moving on to the school calendar.
School calendar is before you for the second review. Option C was the option that our staff and parents responded to as the most favorable response. Briefly, that has a full week of spring break, ends on the last day of May 31st. So looking for your approval of a 18-19 calendar. There would be a mirror then of 19-20, it'd be a 2-year calendar. We just put the second one up because it's a mirror of the first.
Motion to approve?
Second. You're first.
I'll make that motion.
Oh, you.
Second by
okay,
Kelly.
sorry.
You can make a motion.
Sure. For 2 years, correct?
Correct.
Is everybody clear on that?
2 years.
Any other discussion?
I like option A. It ends in June rather than at the end of May. It has the full Lucas rate. And it got 40% approval, I think, on one of the surveys. It was a close second, so,
But option C still has a 4-week spring break.
yes.
All in favor, say aye. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
I'll oppose it just because I liked option A.
I will as well.
Me and Andy, so.
4-2.
4-2. Second reading of board policy 457.
457 is the student wellness policy. This is the second reading. I believe it's all up to date and accurate. I'm looking for approval.
I move that we approve it.
Motion by Lisa to approve, do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Larry Dolphin. Any discussion? All right, all in favor, say aye. Opposed? Motion carried.
Aye.
6-0.
6-0.
Good job, then.
Approval of board policy, the 200 series.
223 series, page 83 in the board packet. Member Hay had brought this up earlier in the meeting.
My comment was that, you see at the bottom where it says, shall regularly, the superintendent shall inform the board regarding the annual development review. I thought it should be that the board approves a budget for professional development, rather than we just are informed. So I sent some language to Luke just a second ago. So I move that this get either approved with that language or tabled till next month.
And the language that you had recommended was the district administrator shall annually present to the board a budget proposal for professional development. In consultation with the district administrator, the board may approve, reject, or modify the proposal. The proposal may identify specific activities along with their expected costs, and it may also identify general goals aligned to the strategic plan.
But we have specific days in the calendars for professional development, right?
This is a budget.
I know. I don't think it has to align with the strategic plan at all, because I think there's different things for professional development that teachers can do.
It didn't say that it has to. It said may.
Did you say may?
The district administrator shall annually present to the board. In consultation with the district, the board may approve, reject, or modify the proposal. The proposal may identify specific activities along with their expected costs, and it may also identify general goals aligned to the strategic plan. So 1 shall and 3 mays.
Shall present the budget, and then it may have the other things.
Make a motion to approve with that change.
I'll second that.
Motion by Jeff with the changes, second by Lisa. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed?
Nay.
Kelly? Motion carried, 5-1. The second reading, board policy 343.
Part-time open enrollment, that has been reintroduced as part of our state statute. We used to have it, it was gone, it's back. This is the policy to reflect how we handle part-time open enrollment.
I move that we approve policy 343.44.
Motion by Lisa to approve,
I'll second.
second by Kelly, but not 4-6. Okay. only for the 4-4. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye. Opposed? That motion carried, 6-1. 6-0.
34345 Technical College Program.
There's a policy and a rule.
There is a policy rule. Do you want to take them in? Well, you can make.
I had a question. I mean, these next couple policies are basically allow juniors and seniors to take classes at Southwest Tech or at Platteville. And it seems like there's a push for this to happen, the dual enrollment credits. Would you agree? Back at this school, I mean,
This is a replacement of youth options. Youth options, kids could go to Southwest Tech, Platteville, wherever. Now at a technical college, instead of youth options, it's called Start College Now. At a four-year school at a university of Platteville, it's the early college credit program. It's kind of the same thing, it's just youth options going through a technical college or youth options going through a four-year school.
So we're redefining what it actually is instead of youth options.
We're using the current language that the state has thrown out there for us.
Okay, so it's dictated by the state and supported by the statute.
I guess my question was whether or not this should be a budgeted item. I mean, I think they're both good programs. They seem like they're becoming more utilized, and with that, they're going to become a bigger cost. And I just think it's a number that we should plan for. And
They're not cheap. They're pretty expensive.
yeah, I mean, this has a limit of 18 credits per student. And then I looked at what the credit costs at Southwest Tech. But what I saw today, and correct me if I'm wrong, was $130 a credit. And then at Platteville, it's like 300 and something a credit. So, I mean, you do the math on that. It can be a sizable number. And I just think that we should have a budget around it. So I thought that maybe we should take another look at these particular policies about just having some budgeting process.
I'm confused because last fall, we were going to lose a student to another school because we couldn't offer one of these options. And it was then, the argument was that we need to keep this student and offer them something. So now we're putting a restriction on something like that. I don't understand.
Well, that was a different thing because it had to do with a deadline that was possibly missed. And like I said, they're both good programs, and I fully support them. But I think that the board, for planning purposes, should have a budget number around this that's proposed by the administration.
So if we have a number, my question is, only so many, if we have a number on it, then only so many students can use it? And not exceed the number that we have? Or are we budgeting it so we know that it's in the budget?
I think I mean, these are lengthy policies, so there are parameters over, kids getting this, and, it might not be fair to have some student who takes, more than their fair share or something. I don't know what the...
Because then it would be a vetting process if we only have a limitation. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Does in order for a student to take a Platteville class, do they have to be in tag?
No, they have a ACT requirement.
There's already criteria in there.
And I think what Lisa's getting at, and it's a good point, up until this point, we've only had a few students actually use it. What happens if it jumps to 20 or 30 students
Right.
at
And it is in the
5,000
process of
apiece?
doing that. I mean, how many kids right now are taking the psychology?
20?
And that's through, is that through
Southwest Tech.
this? Okay, 20. I mean, you're right, it's only been a handful in the past. So it does seem like a growing program, which is good. It is good for the kids, it's good for the parents. It's good for these colleges that are making this extra money. But I do think that we should just watch what the number is and
And
plan for it.
the state has talked about reimbursing schools, but that bucket of money is pretty limited as well. And with more schools doing this, obviously the amount of money they can reimburse schools will be less and less and less.
But help me, Mitch, too, some of this is embedded in state statute with the new program, and if we don't offer the course and they're taking it for dual enrollment credit, do we have to allow for that? We can't cap that, or we can't remove that possibility. I'm thinking of our sociology class or our psychology class, because we don't offer that currently, that would have to be a class that we would have to fund.
Correct.
And that's what we're currently doing. We are budgeting for that. We've already had a conversation about increasing that budget for next year based on our previous year's enrollment. So this is a trend that all schools across the state are starting to wrestle with, because as more kids take the dual enrollment credits, it's going to cost districts at their expense more. There is, like you said, a shared cost model in this approach where we can build back the university or higher educational institution. It's not quite in place yet. I think, go
So
ahead.
when you have it in the budget, what line item is that gonna be if you're putting in the budget for future enrollment?
Currently, we use the old Wisconsin virtual school budget allowance. When we had kids taking online courses, we had money put aside for online, truly online. Now it's more dual enrollment courses. We're using that same line item in the budget for that.
And
shifting those
have you
funds over.
renamed it?
It's just a general header, so it's just, I think it's called, is it maybe even called youth options?
It might be.
Can we change it so it maybe aligns with this?
Yeah, it's fine. It's just a,
I mean,
like you
just
said, it's
so,
a
I
placeholder.
mean, you know, so the language,
The other piece that is part of our strategic plan is to increase the number of AP and dual enrollment courses for kids. We know that the more the kids are exposed to college level courses, the more rigor that's involved in their academic setting, the more proficient they are for being college and career ready. So part of our strategic plan is to actually increase the number of kids that are taking a dual enrollment credit prior to graduation.
and that's taught through the teachers here.
Could be taught through the teachers if they are, what I would say are, I'm not sure if the word is articulated, that they are recognized by the college as a person that could teach that course. So we do have some teachers on site that are able to teach college level courses for dual enrollment. In other cases, we'd be receiving them from high school teachers that are also approved at the college level to deliver that course because of a specialty degree. Or sometimes in the case of our lit class, they're delivering it from a Platteville professor from campus directly to kids. And each one of these courses would come for their high school graduation as well as college credit.
I think to your point, I don't necessarily remember we can budget or cap, but I think if this becomes more popular, we are going to need to be more diligent about whether or not we have a comparable course, whether we offer AP Chem online versus a 3-credit general ed chem at Platteville. I mean, if we offer it here and this becomes popular, not necessarily vetting the student, but vetting the course and using what we offer here first so that our dollars can go to what we don't.
Does the district have the ability to charge parents for a portion of that fee? That was a 50-50 split or something. They're still getting a bargain for the credits.
It was 25. That was
If it's
It
not,
was at 25%.
if it's not used as high school credit,
Right.
they have to
That's
pay
one of the
25%.
language as to how they're wanting to
Yeah.
use the credit.
So shall we come back at this with
I think-
something or not, or just,
It's up to the board.
or know that we have a budget line item for that already?
We do have a budget line item for this. I don't think the policy impacts the budget. I think the budget just needs to reflect the policy because I don't believe we can cap.
In the WASB policy, the PRG, is this the only version of this?
We can look quickly. I don't know if there was another sample.
My 2 cents worth on this is, I think we gotta do everything that we can to encourage our higher performing students to take advantage of these programs. And I know it comes with a cost. I know that's not what you're saying
Yeah, I'm not.
by any stretch, but one of the main concerns I've had since I've been on the school board is kids being college ready.
Yeah, and all
And you
I'm
don't wanna make it
suggesting is that
Cumbersome
is
for
that
families.
we plan for it,
Exactly.
because it seems like a sudden growth item, that's all. I've just seen a big increase.
There are 3 sample policies and 1 sample rule.
Well, we can address later.
Can we,
Well, the figure be this year, Luke, you know, about roughly how much we're gonna spend.
We had budgeted $10,000, I believe, in that line item, give or take a little bit, but that's kind of a rough estimate. I think we're gonna exceed probably that this year. I don't know where our running total is right now, but again, we didn't know we were gonna offer the classes we were gonna offer until they were able to materialize.
UW-Platteville, as you said, was like $300 a credit, and their bill, because of our Boost Consortium, our students are gonna get that for $500 for the 3 credits. So we're getting a price break
that's good. Well,
through
that's,
the university, through our Boost Consortium. And Southwest Tech may be doing the same thing because our, what they call their College Kickstart program is also done through the consortium. So there's been some deals that we've been trying to make that way to help offset the costs. We have taken the tallies for course registration, that's kids, you know, if this fits, I'd like to have this class so we can have a preliminary dollar amount coming forward, looking at next year,
So you
based on
could, you
that.
could base that on those, that $500 for 3 credits and then.
If every student who said they wanted to take the lit class for UW-Platteville got into it, I could tell you it would probably be this dollar amount if it was $500, or if they're taking these classes at Southwest Tech, it would be this dollar amount.
So the projection may be a little bit more clear.
Well, we'll
By-
certainly take this number and increase it by a
Yeah.
percent and try to budget appropriately for it. The only caution I share is WASB has recommended that this policy be in place as soon as possible for
Yeah.
kids that are potentially enrolling in the fall. Their course registration deadline is like April for fall course.
They have to,
I can't remember.
they have to notify the school
By
now.
March 1.
Yeah, now,
That should already happen.
and the universities are a June 1 deadline.
Okay. So to try to get policy in place for a kid that may potentially be taking a fall
Yeah.
course is the urgency, but if you're not comfortable with the policy, there's other school districts that are working through this.
I'll move, I mean, you know, the policy can always be looked at again next year. I'll move we approve policies 343, 45, and the rule in 343, 46.
So we're putting those together.
Yeah.
I'll second it.
Motion by Lisa, second by Jeff to approve both and the rule. Any other discussion? You okay with that?
Yes.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
We
Business services.
did act on this, correct? Yes. So credit card statement, approval of bill total.
Bills payable and the credit card statement of activity. Do you have a motion to approve?
Do you want them together?
Sure. Do you have a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to get on the table.
Motion by Jeff. A second?
I'll approve.
Second by Larry. Any discussion?
I just one question. 6 Mac computers for 11,000, are they that much a piece?
These are the MacBook computers that are desktop in the graphic arts department. So they're larger monitors and they have special software deployed on them because it's using probably the highest end of graphics that computers have. We had started this program 3 years ago with 6 computers. We added another 6 to go 12. That semester we had some kids through schedule changes be interested in the course. And we're actually up above 18. A couple kids then dropped out of the class and 18 now covers that course. We may build in an additional 6 over time if the course numbers continue to increase, but it's a unique machine for a unique purpose.
18 in the class, on computers?
Currently in our graphics arts class, there's I believe 17 or 18 kids that are currently enrolled. Yeah, Leslie's done a nice job of growing that program, and I think
That's a
it
lot of kids.
it expresses our ability to move to where the interests of kids are. And that graphic design program really does some powerful things to prepare kids for careers.
In a past correspondence, Luke, with the first student, you were saying that our contract may change because of Peckatown. Can you explain, and does that reflect in the expenditure this month?
There is no, you'll not see any difference in our normal contractual rates, but Peckatonica, through their request for proposal process, selected a different vendor other than First Student. And that is potentially problematic for our district in that we have shared services with Peckatonica, and some of the rates we were able to negotiate was based on a shared bus barn with a shared dispatch and a shared mechanic and coordinator, director, which is Todd. And now that we're under contract, obviously, so they have to provide a service in that contract. However, financially, they were not anticipating Peckatonica to pull out. So we're waiting to get a communication from First Student with regards to what that means for Mineral Point. On a worst case scenario, they could say we wish to terminate the contract, and then we would have to look at what types of rights or clauses we would be able to apply for breaking or breaching our contract. They may choose to limp along, and then at the end of the contract period, choose to not rebid or look at a different pricing structure in order to recover some of their lost costs. But for right now, because I have not received any information from First Student, I'm proceeding as a status quo and not necessarily raising the issue to prompt them for the inevitable, maybe poor discussion we might have to follow. So we'll just wait and see. I think we're in year 3 of 5. Does that sound right? It's been a while.
Maybe, could be 4.
Could be 4 or 5.
It's been a while.
And the reason I asked, in January, our invoice amount was approximately 10,000 less than it is in February. Why such a difference?
Sometimes that's due to the other co-curricular trips that are in addition to, that's based on the per trip, so we could have a busy month of December and January with holiday trips and so forth, going a little bit further for tournaments. But I'd have to look into the actual invoice and do a comparison. Some of them aren't just, there is the quarterly transportation charge, which is the same number, but then there's also some additional trips that are not built in by quarters based on number of routes to co-curricular activities.
They plan to do it in-house, do they?
There's been no communication about that either way. I just don't know.
Go ahead. Marching band uniforms? I thought we just approved those like 6 months ago or something.
Yeah.
And it's for 15,000.
What's the company name?
So what's the company name?
I think it was under marching. I don't know.
Do you remember which the name of that?
We approved those in the fall.
I don't think they were ordered yet, but I'll check.
I do not, the name of the company right away.
Right.
Stanberry.
Stanberry?
ST?
So that's the same thing we approved in the fall.
I'm almost positive. Let me check.
Did we have to do anything that was over 5,000?
Right, I remember that we had that.
So we approved them to order those and purchase those.
I
Was it
remember,
on
I
accounts
thought I saw
receivable?
them before on the
Okay.
thing, and maybe I'm wrong.
I don't know either.
They may have been like July or August for the first set, and then we came back and asked us to complete the set with bigger sizes.
Remember
For
that? But that
Easter.
was a long time ago.
Yeah, I don't know, I'm not determining when you remember us it being on.
Do we have a complete set now?
I think that's what we approved was the set.
I remember the approval in the fall. I don't remember the order, but we can certainly investigate and respond back. It is the order itself is for 28 uniforms. That'd be the full uniform, and then 4 drum major uniforms. Complete set of $12,985. We'll investigate and respond back.
I have a question. The legal services for Melina, is it Tech?
Yes.
And that was for?
She's been solicited for a couple different things for this particular invoice. The 939.33 was email exchanges with Ms. Dempsey for a mediation session, conferring with myself about alternative mediation opportunities, legal services to draft an IEP for a meeting, legal services to attend a mediated IEP meeting, and mileage for attending that meeting. Total $939.33.
In the future, will we always have to have a lawyer at a mediation? Because I thought the mediator was there to mediate between both parties. So why are we having a lawyer there with us?
The difference was that's a facilitator, it was facilitating the IEP. The mediation is kind of a special session. That's the only mediation I'm aware of that we've gone through in my 7 years. We've only had one mediation, and typically when we get to a point of mediation, we would have an attorney present.
I have another question. It's not what's here. It's about something that, a payment. At one of the space planning committees, it was said that we've paid Nexus the $9,800, and I don't believe we have.
That is incorrect. We've not paid the walkaway fee to Nexus. We've never been invoiced for it, and we have not paid it.
We shouldn't have to be invoiced for that. We broke a contract. It's in the contract that says if you stop here, you owe us $9,800.
For purposes of audits, we don't generate payments without an invoice. So if we were to receive an invoice, we would certainly pay it.
I just think that just sounds wrong. It was contractual. And I think I can find where Matt, did you say that we paid them? Did you say at the meeting that Nexus has been paid? The question was posed?
I don't recall that either. It hasn't happened, so I don't know why anyone would say that.
I think I can find it on film, so, but I'm just gonna put this out there. We broke a contract with them. We have used their materials. FEH has probably seen the materials. But we have utilized them. They did all the buildings, all the schools, inside and out, for $9,800. And we haven't paid them. And I would say that it doesn't look good, it doesn't look good. So I don't know how that was a lot of work, and we broke a contract. And I don't know why the contract can't suffice as an invoice, because we broke it. So, I wouldn't want anyone to think that we hire people and not pay them for the amount of work that they've done.
I'll follow the board's direction on this.
Any other question on the bills payable?
I think the board already gave direction on the Nexus thing.
Not to pay them?
I don't believe that that's the direction that was given.
The direction was given to pay them.
That's my recollection. I mean, somebody would have to go back and look. I don't.
Well, I've heard from several people on that committee that they were asked, the Space Planning Committee, if Nexus has been paid. And I was told that 2 administrators said yes, they've been paid. Because I think that was that they wanted to know how much money was going out. But it just, I don't know how we can continue to use their information and not pay them.
I don't know that we are.
They were giving, the Space Planning Committee was given. This is not about me aligning myself with them. This is about being good business practice. So in the future, contractors will want to work with us. And I just think we haven't paid them. And we've used their information.
So
So give me clarity, would the board like me to request an invoice from Nexus?
Personally, no. If we haven't gotten an invoice, you can't pay without an invoice. I'll have to disagree with you, Kelly.
That's fine, Larry. We can disagree.
No, I know.
I just want it out there how that we have not paid them. That's like me walking out of the store and getting something for $200 and it really costs $500. And me not going back in and saying you didn't charge me enough.
Does anybody else have a comment?
No, an invoice, I wouldn't pay it.
Kelly's question?
I guess I'm just confused why they haven't invoiced us. I mean, that was the deal up front, that it was $9,800 for us to walk away. It's kind of their responsibility to invoice us then.
And I would assume that maybe, if I were a business, Kelly, and I went into a school, it'd be hard for me to invoice a school if I didn't prove that if I did the work and the school wasn't satisfied. I've done work for area farmers, and if they're not satisfied, you get somebody that buys something.
I just want it clear that we did not pay them because in a space planning committee, it was said that we paid them, and we have not.
Okay, we'll make that clear.
So let's get that clear.
All right.
I have another question on the accounts payable, going back to that.
Sure.
There was a 30,000 for the lights. I assume that was reimbursed.
Correct. Yeah, that's out of the Fund 40 account. That is not general operations. It's the stadium note that was reimbursed. I can give you the exact accounts, but in short, we took a stadium note for part of the cost, 90,000. That was board approved, and there are payments that are being remade to that note from private donations. The first payment of that note isn't due until next year in December, but they're already ahead of projection and ready to make the payment for next December, so we are already ahead of schedule. The remaining balance that was owed beyond the 90,000, which is 40,000 for the total project of 130,000, did come out of the Fund 21 account, which is gifts, and specifically gifts for that specific purpose. And you are correct that those dollars were there and are expensed. There still is a gift forthcoming from the Gridiron Club. The money is in the account. They're just waiting for the right opportunity to gift that publicly for recognition purposes, but it fully covers the balance owed.
We have the money from the note already. School has.
From the what already?
From the note approved?
Yes, we do have the money from the note for both the roof as well as the stadium lights.
Another question, what do we do with Pecatonic on the district? Did they agree to anything yet?
Yes, they also approved the resolution to attach,
Yeah.
and now both of us send our resolutions to the Department of Public Instruction, and they'll make that final determination.
So what kind of lights are the poles gonna hold?
Those are halide lights on top of the poles currently.
Can you just verify, Luke, the quote for the same amount said 32 uniforms? Can you just verify?
28 and 4.
That
28
there was
reg-
32 total.
28 regular uniforms and 4
Okay,
drum.
I just heard the 28, so I
Yeah.
wanted to, thank you.
4 drum majors uniforms in addition. Can you give me the history? Do you have that in front of you, I think? Were you looking at?
That was approved, what month am I in? October.
Okay. I think the order is just now materializing.
It said 150 to 180 days
Okay.
after order.
So we're probably receiving the invoice at this time.
We will do a roll call.
Basting,
Abstain.
Bush,
Yes.
Dolphin,
Yeah.
Gudma.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Hay,
Yes.
Stefan.
Yes.
501.
Correct.
Employee services.
Just a brief update of the timeline. We do have posted at this time the Director of Pupil Services position along with the school psychologist position. Our preference is to find a Director of Pupil Service person that also has the school psychologist licensure. However, anticipating that might be a hard person to find, we also have concurrently the school psych position posted. We'll look at both groups of candidates at the same time and start interviewing a week. We'll finish up the posting, closes this Friday. We'll take next week to review the candidates as a committee. That committee is in process of being formed. There has been some already that have expressed interest, but we will have a rounded committee that will represent teachers, instructional assistants, and parents. That committee will make the selection most likely the week after spring break when we return.
So are we going to replace the full-time special ed position?
The full-time special education position at the middle school will then be posted once the Director of Pupil Services is retained, because they will be part of that process to select that person as they'll start building their team going forward. So whether it be an internal or external candidate, it'll give them the opportunity to be part of that process.
Do we need a full-time psychiatrist, Luke, by statute?
We do not have to be with a full-time licensed school psychologist, but we do have to have a school psychologist performing some of the duties and responsibilities around testing of students, specifically special education students and gifted and talented students. That person could be contracted for services through CESA 3 or another consulting service. It could be a part-time position coupled with another school. It could be a full-time position here with a shared position across schools. It could be also a full-time position that gets wrapped up with some of the other needs that we talked about. For instance, if they come with a school psychologist / social worker or / school counselor, we might be able to bundle a position, and the board may wish to consider a full-time position if it's part-time school psych and part-time something else. So that would, again, be more determined by is there a Director of Pupil Services that has school psych, and whether we need that school psych position or not. And if we do, what other strengths do they bring to the table that might be married with other needs that we have across the district? And then the recommendation would be either to contract for services, share the position, or bundle it with some other needs that they would be able to serve the district with.
Could you provide the board with a what-if scenario, and just to get ahead of it, in case it's going to face us that we do not have enough money for what we have? Maybe we do,
Yeah.
with what we know today.
Well, a what-if scenario, obviously, again, going back to the idea that we have a salary cap that we're living underneath, and if we take one person and break them back out into two positions, which is what it was. So the history, back when Jeff Kindle was here prior to Ann Hallskill, it was a bundle position at that time. Jeff had school psychology as well as Director of Pupil Services. It split underneath Ann Hallskill and Brad Brogley. We brought in Claire Knoll at that time, and then Dixie was able to bundle that back up again. So depending on what happens, the what-if scenario is if we have to break it back into two people, that's two salaries and two benefits versus one salary and benefit. There were some cost savings when we bundled that. So that would be our preference, is to try to find, from a fiscally responsible way, one person to do both roles. If we have to go through two scenarios, you very well might just look at that sparsity aid just got chewed up. So we do have an additional $70,000 that is coming in the form of sparsity aid. It is built in right now into this biennial budget. I don't know what would happen after the election process and whether that money continues to stay in the budget or not, but it would fund that position for a year. If that position is bundled up, it frees it up to do some other things, but I don't necessarily think we can count on that. So there's a lot of moving parts on this.
How much is that sparsity aid?
$100 per pupil. And we have $100 per pupil.
That was the extra?
That is the extra in sparsity aid. And
How much
we have
is the
roughly
total?
about $70,000. Roughly 700 kids at $100.
But your question, Larry, is we were already getting sparsity aid, correct?
Yes.
Mhm.
So this increases it an additional $100 over the sparsity aid. Again, we're well underneath the sparsity aid enrollment number cap, but if our enrollment starts to grow, those are dollars that, again, we would not be able to count on to fund a position indefinitely if our enrollment grew. So we have to be careful about calling this new money that is there for a staffing position, because year to year, I'm not sure we can count on that as being
But the sparsity aid goes on FTE, correct?
the sparsity aid is just a general dollar lump sum, so it could be used for FTE or it could be used for computers.
No, I mean as far as student.
Yes, it's per pupil, correct.
Yep.
Yeah, until we get up to a certain threshold, I believe it's 725, is the FTE enrollment number, and at that point, we would lose the sparsity gate altogether. Not just the 100, but the 304.
They are talking a raise on that too, though.
And they're talking 745.
Yeah, 745, thank you.
And there are no plans right now to roll in a social worker.
That is the process that we're working through right now. The board made it a little bit more challenging to bring the idea of a social worker to the table, but it will have to compete with some other interests. And the board will ultimately decide we would rather have a social worker and contract for services with the school psych, or we'd rather have a police liaison officer at the elementary. Those are things we'll have to sift through. But we now are carrying a teacher, obviously based on the work that was done today, forward, so that will, under our salary cap, limit the number of additional options that we can consider.
One more question. If we have a licensed teacher to become a licensed social worker, is that possible or not?
If they have the licensure, nobody currently that I'm aware of has that licensure as a teacher. I know you've gone through this and combed it. It's a special license, and I am not aware. Heather Damp, our previous clerical, also had a school counselor, but not social worker.
Joel, do you have a license for?
No. There is one, I don't know if it's a license, I think in her former role, but it was not a school social worker, I think it was
Private?
private, yeah.
So, yeah, the licensure is different.
I think do you need to have your master's to work in schools?
I don't know what the criteria
In
is.
some positions, for sure, I don't know about social worker.
For social workers, working schools, like, not that there's a master's, but I could be wrong.
Because I know on our next operations meeting, that will be a topic that I'd like to discuss too.
Yes.
All right. Does that conclude the agenda?
Concludes the agenda, yes.
Next meeting date?
April 9th, I want to say. April 9th.
Okay, motion to adjourn.
I will.
Motion by Kelly, a second. Second by Larry, all in favor, say aye.
No, I was just looking up.
Right. I was sitting there looking at you and I'm like,
All stand for the pledge.